Imagine yourself sitting at the edge of an ancient lake, the water reflecting a dim sky like a twilight that forgot to fade. The wind drifts gently, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. And somewhere in the distance, the faint cry of a bird echoes from nowhere. There is no sound of machines, no electric light, only the murmur of water and the slow heartbeat that seems to come from the earth itself. Night descends gradually, and you can feel time slowing around you, as if the world wants you to linger here a little longer. Perhaps in a place like this, the world that existed before history still breathes within the mist and the shadows. In that stillness, I want to take you far away, beyond the reach of memory, into the time before Atlantis. Before kingdoms, before names were ever spoken. A world where humankind was not a ruler, but a silent witness to something far older than itself. Take a slow breath. Let go of the noise that clings from the present age. Imagine each gust of wind pulling us backward through cold and dark layers of forgotten time. There is no map to guide us, no record to explain where we are heading. Yet that is where the beauty lies. Between the blank spaces of history, between the missing lines of ancient manuscripts, lies the story of a world that once stood proud before the sea rose to swallow the land, before the volcanoes erupted and erased names that were never carved in stone. This world is unknown to modern civilization, but its traces remain, the strange patterns beneath the ocean, in the legends told by ancient tribes who never met, yet share the same memory. Before we move further, let your body relax. Listen to the rhythm of your breath merge with a sound you cannot name, like the pulse of the earth recalling its past. Picture the old stones sunken beneath the sea, covered in coral and silence. Among those corals may still stand the remains of great pillars. Fragments of temples or palaces built with a logic beyond our understanding. Who built them and why? No one knows. Yet somehow, whenever humankind finds something that should not exist, like artifacts from ages long before modern humans, we feel the world trying to remember itself. Perhaps tonight is not only for telling stories, but for listening to what has never been told. The earth carries memories both long and heavy. There was an age when the mountains were soft and the seas unsalted, when the stars hung closer and the wind carried songs of beings that no longer walk among us. Before Atlantis, before Egypt or Sumer, there were other civilizations that stood in silence. They understood light differently, spoke with stone and water, and knew time as something they could feel, not count. Let us open that curtain slowly, like opening a window in a long-sealed room. Because behind the mist that veils history, that world still exists, waiting to be seen again by eyes willing to believe. Around 12,000 years before the first calendar was made, the earth entered a strange era. The seas rose and fell without any predictable pattern. Coastlines shifted hundreds of kilometers within a single human lifetime. Ice melted in the north, yet some southern lands froze instead. In the middle of that unrecorded transition, there were places now only remembered as shadows beneath the ocean. Scientists call them submerged continental shelves, remnants of the crust from the last glacial age. But for those who trace the old legends, these places are more than geological formations. They believed that long before written history, civilizations had already risen and fallen, their world older than Atlantis and quieter than any human record. One of the most often mentioned regions lies between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Once that land might have stretched for thousands of kilometers, connecting islands that are now separated by deep water. Lemuria, the Theosophists called it. But before that name existed, ancient peoples told its story in different forms. In Tamil legends, it was called Mu. In Polynesian myth, a great island lost to the anger of the sea. In early Indian records, a land swallowed by waves when humans forgot to honor the sky. All these stories point to the same truth, that something once existed there. Something vast and enduring, beyond the limits of time and reason. Lemuria, or whatever it was once called, might not have been a single continent, but a vast network of lands and islands connected by shallow seas, habited by people who knew how to read the stars long before compasses were invented. They left no writing, yet the stones they arranged contain patterns that seem to speak a language only the ocean understands. Some researchers believe the ruins found beneath the Indian Ocean show signs of architecture walls. Stairs, roads repeating with symmetry, too perfect to be natural. Others reject this, calling it geological illusion. Yet, if you stare long enough at the sonar images tracing those lines, it's hard not to feel that something deliberate once stood there. The night grows quieter, and in this darkness, imagine that vast land still standing. Mountains rise along the shore. Rivers drift through mist-covered valleys. The wind carries the scent of wildflowers that no longer exist. Upon a cliff, perhaps a tower of stone burns with a sacred fire to mark the turning of seasons. The sea below lies calm, but in the distance, great shadows move beneath the waves. No ships, no sound of worldly life unfolding in a rhythm of its own, as though time itself spun slower upon that continent. They lived under a great, low-hanging moon, as if the earth and sky still spoke gently to each other, before silence finally took them both. If someone could walk upon the lands of Lemuria back then, they might feel as though they were treading through a world not yet finished being written. Everything looked ancient, yet new, as if the earth had just awakened from a long sleep. The soil was rich, filled with plants of shapes and colors unknown to modern humanity. Forests were not mere gatherings of trees, but silent kingdoms where the air felt denser. And each step echoed faintly, absorbed by the ground. The animals there looked calm, unafraid of humans, for the bond between them had not yet turned into the act of hunting. Clear rivers flowed from the mountains to the plains, carrying minerals that gave their surfaces a silver sheen. The sky was gray-blue in the morning and turned to muted gold by evening. There were no extreme seasons, only subtle shifts between warmth and coolness, as though nature itself was still learning balance. In the highlands, people built their dwellings from stone and clay. Their houses were not tall, yet each seemed part of the landscape rather than foreign to it. Some were circular, perhaps gathering places, perhaps sanctuaries, or simply spaces to wait for the night. At the center of their settlements stood a larger ring of stones, with a hollow in the middle that looked like a well but contained no water. Modern researchers call it an altar or an observatory, but to those who lived there, it was likely the heart of all things. They believed the earth spoke through stone, and the sky answered through light. So each time the sun sank, they would sit around the stones, waiting for the first star to appear. When that small light finally rose in the heavens, one of them would bow their head, as if hearing something only silence could carry. Their lives were not measured by calendars, but by the patterns of nature. They knew when to plant, when to let the soil rest, when to leave home to follow the migrating fish. There was no leader shouting commands, only keepers of time who watched the heavens, marking the days when the moon looked strange. They did not know war as we understand it, but they knew loss. Sometimes storms came so great they swallowed entire villages. Sometimes the mountain they worshipped spat fire, forcing them to move and rebuild from nothing. Yet they did not complain. They believed the earth was breathing, and humanity was merely part of that breath. When night came, they lit fires in the center of their villages, not to chase away the dark, but to honor what came with it. The fire was seen as a gate between the human world and another, unseen but ever present. Children sat nearby, listening to old stories about creatures beneath the sea or lights in the sky said to be the wandering souls of their ancestors. Amid the sound of crackling flame, faint whispers could sometimes be heard, like songs carried from afar. No one knew where they came from, yet no one felt fear. To them, silence was not emptiness. It was the first language ever created before words were born. Some historians who study ancient records believe that Lemuria was not merely a continent, but the first laboratory of civilization on Earth. They argue that the knowledge that flourished there was not a coincidence, but an inheritance from something older than history itself. Strange inscribed stones have been found at the bottom of the Indian Ocean, shaped like writing, yet resembling the frozen flow of water. The symbols cannot be translated, but some archaeologists claim the patterns might not be a language at all, but a system of energy. It is possible that the people of Lemuria communicated not through sound, but through resonance with nature, something that could only be perceived by one who listened with the whole body, not just the ears. They did not write to be read. They wrote to be remembered by the earth itself. Legends from islands scattered across the Indian Ocean speak of a vanished city beneath the waves, where keepers of time watch the heavens and inscribe the fate of humankind using starlight. On certain small islands, locals still preserve ancient water songs, low repetitive chants believed to calm the sea. These songs, it is said, came from the days when Lemuria stood proud, when women sang by the shore each night to ensure the earth would not shake too fiercely beneath their feet. To them, the balance of the world was not guarded by armies or laws, but by human voices harmonizing with the elements. Artifacts unearthed in southern Madagascar displayed geometric forms of astonishing precision, as though crafted by hands that understood the proportion of stars. The stones' bare carvings aligned perfectly with the sun's position during the solstice. In the quiet of modern laboratories, scientists have tried to decode their purpose. Yet the deeper they go, the less rational the answers become. It feels as if each stone holds coordinates to the heavens rather than the earth. Researchers call them cosmic archives, possibly used to remember the positions of celestial bodies in cycles longer than human lifespans. In Lemurian thought, time did not move in a straight line, but spun like a whirlpool, with every point within it offering a chance to repeat or repair what was left undone. Perhaps that is why they built in circles, planted in spirals, and wrote in curves. Everything they made reflected their belief that nature knows no straight lines. Even beneath the silence of the sea that swallowed their land, circular forms still appear on the ocean floor, like signatures of a civilization unwilling to be erased. Yet the greatest mystery lies not in what they left behind, but in what they knew before they vanished. Some theories suggest that before sinking, they warned the world of great changes to come not through words, but through energy seated deep within the earth. Some believe that ancient mountains, stone monuments, and mysterious lines scattered across the globe are echoes of that warning. Signals that can only be understood by those who still remember the Earth's original pulse. Slowly, the world of Lemuria began to change without a sound. There were no wars, no explosions, no disasters that arrived suddenly. It happened like the long exhale of a planet weary from holding too many secrets. The sea rose inch by inch, though human eyes did not notice. The air grew damp, and the stars at night seemed to drift farther away each evening. In the stone carvings found near the Mascarene Islands, there are depictions of a sun losing its brilliance not because of darkness, but because the world below was losing its reflection. Perhaps that was the beginning of Lemuria's submergence, not a punishment, but the quiet rebalancing of forces that no one could control. Its people continued their daily lives. They planted crops, carved stones, sang water songs, and built circular structures of translucent crystal that mirrored the ocean's blue. In certain regions, they began to notice that the ground beneath them cracked in peculiar patterns, like delicate webs spreading across the land. The elders read these signs the way one might read a pulse. They knew something was shifting beneath their feet, yet no one dared to speak the final word. They believed every cycle had its crest and its calm, and perhaps to them, the sinking of their land was merely another form of the Earth's long sleep. Some coastal legends from Madagascar and Sri Lanka tell of a light that appeared at sea every night before Lemuria vanished, soft bluish-white glow, like the final breath of a dying world. It lasted for 40 days, during which no bird flew across the ocean. The people called it the last light, a sign that the sea was beginning to reclaim its sacred ground. In certain submerged sea caves hundreds of meters deep, divers report carvings on the stone walls showing the ocean embracing the land rather than destroying it. There was tenderness in that destruction, as if the earth were lulling its child to sleep to spare it from pain. Lemuria disappeared, not with screams, but with song. Women at the shores continued to sing until the final moment, their voices merging with the waves and the trembling of the earth. It is said that the song reached the heavens, and some stars above the Indian Ocean quivered as if they were listening. No one knows where the Lemurians went. Some say they followed the ocean currents and built luminous cities beneath the waves. Others believe they sailed west, carrying shards of their crystal homes to seed new lands, the beginning of what would later be called Atlantis. Yet none of these tales can be proven. What remains are faint echoes beneath the sea and a quiet loneliness that rises whenever the ocean wind wanders without direction. The final days of Lemuria unfolded like a long dream that refused to end. The sun still rose gently, its light touching a sea that crept slightly higher each morning. Yet the people did not see it as a warning. They lived within a rhythm unchanged for millennia. At dawn, the sound of stone bells echoed from valley to valley, marking the beginning of the day's work. The bells were not made of metal, but of blue stone that resonated when sunlight touched it, their tones reaching all the way to the shores. Farmers walked slowly toward the terraced fields carved into the hillsides. The soil of Lemuria was rich beyond comparison. Grains grew in soft shades of violet, and wildflowers shimmered in the light as though tiny stars had fallen into their petals. There were no dangerous beasts. Even the great ancient elephants walked peacefully among the people, for the bond between humans and creatures of that age had not yet been broken. At the center of the land stood a vast structure called the Eye of the Sea. It was a perfect circle, with a pool at its heart that rotated slowly, as though pulled by something beneath. Its waters were clear as glass and reflected the sky in different colors each day. The elders of Lemuria gathered there under every full moon to listen to the heartbeat of the earth. They did not speak in prayers as modern humans do. Instead, they sat in silence, breathing in rhythm with the pulse of the ground. Sometimes, amid that quiet, they heard a faint rumbling from within the pool, like a whisper trying to remind them of something. Yet they only smiled, for to them the earth never threatened. It merely spoke in a language too vast to translate. The children of Lemuria grew up in a world untouched by the weight of time. They played among glowing stones, climbed trees with silvery leaves, and learned to read the wind with their eyes closed. Each evening, as the sun descended, the teachers gathered beneath crystal towers to teach the patterns of the stars and the history of the sea. To them, the sky was not a view, but a living map of memory. Legend told that in an age-long past, the stars once descended closer to the earth and gave humankind the first spark of thought. Since then, Lemuria preserved knowledge not through writing, but through song and stone. Every melody carried wisdom. Every carved pattern was a prayer that required no eyes to read. At night, the city mirrored the sea itself. Crystals and minerals embedded within the walls absorbed moonlight and released it slowly as a soft blue glow. Fire no longer existed in Lemuria, for they had long outgrown it. Light came from the earth's living energy, mastered since their earliest days. Their homes were circular, their roofs open to the stars, and each dwelling contained a small pool of water for meditation. They believed that every home must hold a reflection of the sky so that its inhabitants would never forget where they came from. In the quiet of night, only the sound of dripping water from the crystals and the gentle songs of women calming their children could be heard. Everything felt peaceful, serene, and no one knew that this peace was slowly drifting toward its end, beneath the eye of the sea. In depths few ever reach, not even the eldest among them, lay a silent chamber known as the Heart of Stone. There was no door to enter it, only a slow-moving current that spiraled like an unending thought. Only the oldest guardians knew how to descend to that place, They did not swim or dive as ordinary humans would. Instead, they lowered themselves through vibration. Their bodies seemed to dissolve into the water, as if the water recognized them and parted to let them pass. Deep below the surface stood a structure older even than Lemuria itself. Its walls were made of black stone, lined with clear crystal that glowed from within, as though it contained the breath of the earth. No sound existed there, except for the gentle pulse coming from the pool's depths, a constant, soothing rhythm. The guardians who entered spoke no words, for that chamber required none. Everything that needed to be said already existed in the air, in the water, and in the slow breathing light around them. At the chamber's center rested an object known as the core of the sea, a great spiral-shaped stone that rotated almost imperceptibly. Its surface was smooth and cool, yet at times it trembled as if dreaming. According to the Guardian's ancient oral records, the stone was not born of the earth. It had fallen from the sky in an age unknown, before the first mountains rose and the seas still covered nearly all land. The stone had never cracked, never changed color, and always turned in the same direction into itself. They believed that as long as the stone continued its eternal motion, Lemuria would endure. But should it ever cease, the time that protected them would stop as well. Thus, the Guardian's duty was not merely to protect a sacred relic, but to preserve the balance between earth, sea, and breath. They were not priests or kings, for no one ruled over another in Lemuria. All were bound by the same rhythm, the gentle, unseen pulse of the earth itself. Each night before the full moon, the Guardians ascended to the surface to light the lamps surrounding the eye of the sea. These lamps were not fueled by fire, but by small crystals infused with the energy of the core. When they glowed, their reflections spread across the water and formed a circle of light in the sky, a luminous ring protecting the continent below. From afar, the people of Lemuria watched and felt safe, knowing that as long as the lights burned, the earth was still listening to them. Yet on one night, quieter than any before, the Guardians noticed something strange. The pulse of the core began to slow. The gentle, rhythmic light dulled. The waters around the heart of stone turned pale gray, like a sky that had forgotten how to breathe. No one knew what it meant. They waited in silence, hoping the rhythm would return, but the stillness felt like an omen. Some guardians rose to warn the elders, while others stayed behind, believing the earth was merely meditating, not dying. In Lemurian tradition, there was no word for destruction. Everything was seen as part of an endless cycle of sleep and waking. Yet that night felt different. The wind from the sea carried a sound no one had ever heard before, low, drawn-out breath from the world's depths. A mountain to the east shuddered gently, then stopped, as if trying to remember something long forgotten. The elders gathered around the eye of the sea, staring into the circle of water now spinning faster than ever. They knew something was changing, but none could speak it aloud. The world of Lemuria was still beautiful, still peaceful, yet within that peace, something unfamiliar began to stir like the first shadow before the night arrives. The days following the change in the core's vibration felt unusually long, as if time itself had slowed. The people of Lemuria who lived by the sea began to notice that the sound of the waves had changed. It was neither harsh nor gentle, but rolled in a low tone that seemed to contain words no one could understand. Children stopped playing on the shore because they felt the water was now speaking in a language too ancient to recognize. Fishermen who cast their nets at dawn returned early, bringing back strange catches. The fish they caught had scales that glowed like glass, and some had no eyes, only smooth hollows that reflected the light of the sky. They did not know whether it was a good or bad omen. The elders decided to keep the fish in stone vessels, neither eaten nor sold, only observed. In Lemurian tradition, every small change in the sea was a message, and their duty was to listen, not react. Meanwhile, in the heart of the continent, where the air was always warm and the valleys covered in thin mist, new flowers began to bloom, flowers that had never existed before. Their color was like sunlight trapped underwater, and their petals opened only at night. People called them the breath of the earth because their scent calmed even the most restless soul. Yet over time, some began to dream strange dreams after breathing in their fragrance. They dreamed of the sea that spoke of vast shadows moving beneath the waves, of cities standing in the sky and slowly sinking into the water. When they awoke, nothing around them had changed, but the feeling remained deep within their chests, like something waiting to be remembered. In the sky, the clouds started to move in patterns unseen before. Sometimes they formed perfect circles that floated for hours before dissolving in the wind. A star watcher in the tallest stone tower recorded that the stars themselves were shifting slightly. Not enough to cause alarm, but enough to make the hearts of scholars tremble. They began writing their notes with heavier strokes, as if pressing harder might stop whatever was changing. No one knew whether the shift came from the heavens or from the earth below. The guardians of the core remained silent. They made no reports, no denials. They simply continued their watch, believing that great changes sometimes must be allowed to pass untouched. Yet not everyone could accept the silence. In a coastal city called Alhuna, a young woman named Sai began to hear faint echoes whenever she stood by the water's edge. The sound did not come from the sea, but from within herself. She began drawing symbols in the sand, symbols no one had taught her, but which felt deeply familiar. Each time she wrote them, the waves came and gently erased them, as if refusing to let the secret be revealed. The townspeople thought her strange, but did not scold her, for Sai was known to carry the blood of the old guardian line. She had never seen the heart of stone, yet in her dreams, she often saw a glowing, spiraling rock calling to her in a soft voice that said, "Your time is near." A few nights later, Sai began walking in her sleep. She followed a voice only she could hear, toward the sea under the moonlight. Her steps were slow and calm, like someone who already knew the path. When she reached the shore, the tide receded, opening a narrow, glimmering way into the depths. No one saw her that night, and by morning, only footprints remained in the sand. In the village, whispers spread of the call of the water, an ancient belief that when the sea wished to speak, it chose one person to listen. Those chosen rarely returned. Yet the people believed that whenever someone went to the sea that way, the world became a little more balanced, as if the earth itself took a deep breath before continuing to live again. After the night Sai disappeared, the sea around Alhuna grew still in a strange way. The waves refused to touch the shore, and the waterline stopped exactly at the sand's edge, as if holding its breath. For 3 days, no wind came from the ocean, and the boats tied to the docks swayed lightly without moving. The townspeople called it the time of the silent sea. They burned incense along the beach and scattered salt powder over the water, an old ritual to honor those chosen by the sea. But the 4th night brought something unseen before. A faint light began to glow beneath the surface, moving slowly like the breath of some enormous creature sleeping deep within the earth. Its color shifted from pale blue to soft green, then to a silvery white that was almost blinding. There was no sound, only a vibration that resonated in their chests, like a heartbeat coming from the heart of the world. When morning came, the shoreline had changed shape. Coral stones, once hidden beneath the water, now emerged like a row of ancient altars, some covered in moss, others carved with unknown patterns. Some believed they were remnants of old structures, perhaps from a time when the sea was still land. Those brave enough to approach reported hearing faint sounds from within the stone songs, only audible to hearts completely still. The elders warned not to touch them, believing the stones were markers of a gate to the world below, where the souls of the old guardians rested. But human curiosity is not easily silenced. A young man from Alhuna carried a torch and tried to explore one of the gaps among the coral. He never returned. When they searched for him, all they found was his extinguished torch resting in the softly trembling water. On the 7th day, the sea surface began to reflect strange images. It no longer mirrored the sky, but revealed shadows of tall structures moving beneath the waves. They looked like towers and domes, some covered in glowing algae, others gleaming as if newly built. Those who stared too long at the water's surface began to feel dizzy, as if their bodies were being gently pulled downward by something unseen. A young observer claimed to see a woman standing among the towers, her hair flowing with the current, her eyes open, her face calm as if asleep. Many believed it was Sai, now part of the sea that had chosen her. The guardians of the core heard of this and came from the south on stone vessels that glided without oars. They arrived silently and went straight to the beach, speaking to no one. When night fell, they built a ring of stones and lit a blue fire that gave no smoke. The light reflected off their calm faces, and from within the circle came a low, chanting rhythm, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth. No one dared to come close, but the whole city stayed awake that night, listening from afar to what felt like both a prayer and a warning. By morning, the guardians were gone. Only small black stones remained on the sand, arranged neatly pointing toward the sea. After that night, the waves returned to their usual rhythm, but everyone knew something had changed. The fish came back, though their scales now glowed dimmer, as if they had lost part of their light. The children played again by the shore, though they no longer shouted, only laughed softly while watching the sea with quiet respect. A few nights later, the light beneath the water returned softer this time, moving like a breath falling asleep. The people came to believe that the sea had fully accepted Sai, and within that silence, the world had found its balance once more. Yet for those who could hear the subtler whispers of the earth, the change was not an ending. They began to hear something new beneath the waves. Not a human voice, not a creature's cry. It was as though the sea was remembering, as if each wave carried fragments of a memory too ancient to understand, but still yearning to be heard. On calm nights, those who stayed awake swore they heard a faint call echoing from afar, like the remnant of a forgotten name. It sounded like lemur, but before they could finish it, the sea breeze swept through and erased the sound, leaving behind a silence both peaceful and quietly afraid. The guardians who returned to the heart of Lemuria carried silence with them. They sailed for 7 days across an ocean that looked like liquid glass, without waves, without stars in the sky. Only a faint glow rose from the seabed, guiding their path like glowing veins within the body of the earth. On the 7th day, a gentle mist rose from the surface, and behind that gray veil appeared the shadow of a massive wall, half submerged and towering from the depths. It was the southern gate, the entrance to the heart of Lemuria, where the oldest guardians lived and where all records of existence were stored on paper, but within the water itself. As their vessel approached, the sea's surface trembled softly, as if welcoming them home. The stones around the gate emitted a faint copper light, and with each pulse, the air grew heavier, as though it carried a history too dense for time to hold. Beyond the gate stretched a city that could hardly be described. It was not built upon land, but hung between water and light, like a shadow given form. Its buildings were layered with salt and sea crystals, and every wall reflected the face of the ocean above. There were no footsteps in that city, for the ground was covered by a film of water as thin as mist. At its center stood a great tower called the Heart of the Earth, where the blue light from the depths was gathered and distributed throughout Lemuria. Within it, the eldest guardians kept the living memory of the world, not through writing, but through the memory of water. They believed every drop of water remembered something, and their duty was to listen, interpret, and preserve that memory so it would never fracture or fade. When the guardians from Alhuna arrived, they were received in silence. There was no greeting, no speech, only the calm gaze of those who had long merged with the sea. Their bodies seemed made of both flesh and light, and their eyes reflected the endless turning of the ocean. They walked through circular paths where pillars of stone bore moving symbols that breathed softly. In the tower's main chamber, they bowed their heads and placed the black stone from Alhuna upon the altar of water. The stone sank slowly, then released a pulse of light that spread through the room. The walls quivered gently, and the water in the central pool shimmered with an image. The image revealed a vast ocean older than blue. Beneath its surface ran a network of light, pulsing slowly like veins of life, connecting luminous points across the world. The guardians understood that the sea was changing. The glow beneath the water was not a mere natural event, was a sign that the memory layers of the earth were shifting. They called it the fracture of time, a moment when the boundary between the real and the forgotten began to dissolve. In such a state, anything lost could return, and anything living could vanish without trace. A young guardian, newly initiated, looked upon the water in fear and wonder. He asked in a trembling voice if this change meant the awakening of something buried long ago. The eldest guardian answered without words, only with a soft motion of her hand over the water. The ripples formed from her gesture shaped faint symbols across the surface, creating a word barely pronounceable by human tongues. It meant both awakening and destruction. She said the old world of Lemuria might be calling back its missing parts. And if that call went unrestrained, the sea would consume anything resonating within its ancient frequency. Afterward, the Guardians dispersed throughout the city to strengthen the boundaries of energy, keeping Lemuria from sinking completely. They touched the stone pillars, lighting small blue flames at their fingertips, each spark producing a soft resonance that spread across the ocean. Above them, schools of luminous fish spiraled in vast patterns, as if listening. Within the near-perfect silence, faint rumblings echoed from beneath the seabed, signaling that something deep within was beginning to stir, awakening from a sleep far too long. The Guardians looked to one another, not with fear, but with the quiet understanding that their time to guard the memory of the world was nearing its end. Night in the heart of Lemuria was never truly dark. Above the ocean that surrounded the city, a soft blue glow pulsed gently, as if the sky itself was reflecting from a time unseen by humankind. There was no moon, yet the air shimmered with faint sparks of light, like fragments of drowned stars. The Guardians called it the Earth's breath, the subtle vibration that maintained balance between the visible and the unseen. Each night, they gathered around the main pool beneath the towering central spire. They sat in a circle, gazing into the water that reflected their faces with a slight delay, as though the image that surfaced was their future selves looking back in silence. In this ritual, they spoke no words, for they believed that water held more answers than language ever could. At the bottom of that pool lay a web of crystals, pulsing softly like living veins. From there emerged faint vibrations that sometimes turned into whispers, carrying memories that belonged to no one, yet felt familiar to all who listened. Sometimes it sounded like children's laughter from a vanished age, sometimes like prayers spoken in a language long forgotten by the surface world. There were nights when the water trembled more strongly, projecting faint visions of other cities, ones that may have existed, or perhaps were only echoes of a lost time. A city beneath the sea appeared briefly, with broken towers and crumbling bridges, then disappeared, as if swallowed by the current of memory. The Elder Guardians always warned against staring too long at those reflections. They said memories too powerful could pull the living into their current. Yet the younger Guardians often couldn't resist their curiosity. They stared deep into the water, trying to recognize the unfamiliar faces flickering among the ripples, and some began to dream of places they had never been. In their dreams, streets of salt stretched into unfamiliar directions, and the voice of a woman from the depths called names they did not possess. When they awoke, their eyes glimmered with the same faint glow as the pool's surface. One of them, a young guardian named Uan, began to record what he saw in his dreams, even though writing was considered unnecessary in Lemuria. He used hardened stones from the pool's edge to carve strange symbols he felt were not his own creation. He drew spiraling lines, like whirlpools, narrowing into a single point. Other guardians noticed and began imitating his markings until a pattern encircled the tower. No one knew its meaning, yet whenever the water trembled, those markings emitted a faint light that spread slowly, connecting them to something beneath the sea far larger than Lemuria itself. On the seventh night after those visions, the voice from below grew stronger. It was no longer a whisper, but a heavy hum, like stones shifting on the seabed. The ground beneath the tower quivered gently, and the water in the main pool rose slightly, distorting the reflections of the guardians' faces. The eldest among them exchanged silent glances. They knew what it meant. The boundary between the upper and inner worlds was beginning to open. They reached their hands into the water, trying to calm its surface, but every touch only made the ripples multiply. Then slowly the water parted like a curtain. From within rose a vertical beam of light, piercing toward the sky, forming a blue column so bright that the entire city seemed to awaken in a single breath. Around the tower, the shadows of buildings shifted shape. Pillars once solid now looked like frozen streams of water. The usually silent streets echoed with invisible footsteps, as though the past itself was walking back to its place. The guardians stood motionless, realizing Lemuria was changing, slowly becoming a mirror for something older than time itself. In that silence, an ancient voice emerged from within the tower, not from any mouth, but from the stone itself. It spoke in the language of water, yet its meaning was felt directly within the hearts of all who listened. The voice said that the boundary between past and present was dissolving, and if they did not seal it, Lemuria would become the bridge through which a forgotten world might rise again. The words carried no threat, only the weary tone of the earth itself, tired of keeping secrets. The eldest guardians bowed their heads, understanding that their duty was no longer just to guard memory. They now had to guard reality from collapsing into remembrance. Since the night the pool split and the light rose into the sky, Un had never truly slept again. He still closed his eyes each night, yet what came was not dreams, but memories that did not seem to belong to him. In the silence, he saw another world still damp with the scent of ancient seas, but without towers, guardians, or blue light pulsing over the water. There was only a vast plain of black stone and rivers of salt flowing under a copper sky. He saw people walking in silence, wearing garments woven from sea fibers, carrying small glowing stones in their palms. They spoke without words, communicating through the flicker of those stones and subtle movements of their fingers. Each time one of the stones went dark, a person would fall silent, their body hardening into salt, merging with the land. When Un awoke from the vision, his body trembled as if emerging from icy water. On his palms were thin, glowing lines like cracks in glass. He tried to cover them, but the light pulsed through the cloth, blinking like a heartbeat that refused to stop. He realized something was growing inside him, something neither blood nor bone could contain. Within him, a voice of the sea was trying to speak. In the following days, the other guardians noticed his silence. He no longer spoke, only stared into the pool with distant eyes. Often he drew new symbols on the ground, more intricate than before, circles crossing upon circles, like maps of a drowned world. The elder guardians watched from afar, afraid, yet curious. They knew something in Lemuria's order was shifting. that someone among them might have become a vessel for memories meant to remain sealed. On the third night after that change, the main pool stirred again. But this time, the water glowed not blue, but silver, like a mirror reflecting a moon that wasn't there. Un stood by its edge, his eyes glowing the same color. He knelt and touched the surface. The water did not ripple. It rose slowly, wrapping his hand like liquid mist. From within came a sound, not a hum or a whisper, but a low chant that seemed to rise from the chest of the earth itself. The chant had no words, yet its vibration formed images in the minds of all who listened. They saw a vast city, far larger than Lemuria, with transparent pillars reflecting light from the ocean floor. Roads spiraled around a central heart of light that pulsed like the world's core. Their beings walked slowly, not fully human, their bodies faintly glowing beneath their skin like fire trapped in glass. They carried shells with small spinning whirlpools inside them. Each time the whirlpool stopped, the being looked upward, and the light in its body dimmed. Unsensed that what he saw was not the future nor a dream. It was a memory left behind in the water. Lemuria was only a faint reflection of a civilization far older one that had tried to transcend time and failed. That underwater city, where light and sound were one language, had vanished before the first human-lit fire upon the earth. Yet its resonance lingered in the molecules of the sea, waiting for someone sensitive enough to hear it again. When the vision faded, Un remained still, his hands still submerged. The elder guardians approached, trying to pull him away, but the water now seemed an extension of his body. Every tug sent waves of light across the surface, and from the pool's depths rose flashes like tiny stars. The light climbed up his arm, then disappeared into his chest. His body glowed briefly, then dimmed. After that, only the sound of the distant sea remained, calm and indifferent, as if nothing had happened. Yet, something had changed. The symbols carved on the ground began to glow without being touched, and the air around the pool thickened, heavy with a hidden force. The guardians understood the underwater world was stirring once more, searching for a way back through the memory of mankind. After that night, the city of Lemuria no longer beat with the same rhythm. Time there began to feel fluid, no longer following the sequence of morning, noon, and night. The shadows of towers stopped moving with the sun, and the sea beneath the cliffs no longer receded when it should. The guardians realized that hours in their city seemed to stretch, expanding like a long breath, then collapsing slowly into silence. The seabirds that used to glide over the dome of light now hung frozen in the air, wings motionless, as if caught between one heartbeat and the next. No one knew when it started, only that it began after Uan had touched the silver water that rose from the main pool. People in Lemuria began to dream strange dreams. They saw their own city, but larger, older, standing beneath the sea with a greenish glow rising from the depths. In those dreams, they walked the same streets, spoke the same words, yet their faces were different replicas of lives that had long ended. Some priests said these were signs that their souls were remembering the true beginning of Lemuria, an age when the city was not built on land but under the sea, where light and time merged into one vast consciousness. Each morning, the fog grew thicker. The sunlight appeared only as a faint echo, and the silver pool at the city center reflected shapes that could not exist. Sometimes, figures like humans passed slowly beneath the surface, only to vanish again. At other times, footsteps echoed as if someone walked through the water, tracing invisible corridors. Yuan still spoke to no one, yet he sat by the pool each day, drawing new symbols on the cracked, glowing ground. The elder guardians began recording these changes. They carved into stone every shift of time, the flowers that now bloomed before dawn, the sound of water speaking slower than before. They knew something beneath the city was awakening, something that had been asleep for ages. Among their records, one sentence appeared again and again, written by many hands in many forms. The sea is remembering us. As days passed, the border between the living world and the drowned world blurred. The sound of waves echoed from within the walls, and the air carried a salt scent, not from the shore. In the silence of night, people heard a faint song, the same melody that once rose from the silver pool when Yuan had touched it. Its tone was soft and low, yet it pierced through skin and bone, making the listener feel like their body was a vessel of vibrating water resonating with that ancient tune. Children were born with strange marks on their skin patterns, like waves or fins that shimmered gently under the full moon. The elders called them children of the sea, a sign that Lemuria was slowly returning to the ocean where it once belonged. No one panicked. No one resisted. Everything unfolded with an eerie calm, as if the entire city understood that this was something inevitable. In Aaron's final vision, he saw Lemuria completely submerged. There was no destruction, no chaos. The stone structures remained, and people walked calmly through undersea gardens that sparkled like glass. Above them, the sky was no longer blue, but a vast sheet of water illuminated from below. There, in the heart of the ocean, Yuan saw something no one had ever seen before. Great form, like a heart, beating slowly, each pulse sending ripples through the sea, like the breath of a living planet. When he opened his eyes, morning did not come. Only silver mist covered the city. The sea had reached the base of the towers, and from the deep earth came a soft sound, a lullaby from a time before time. Lemuria slowly was returning home. When the final days of Lemuria arrived, the sky no longer changed color. It remained a soft gray, suspended without direction, as if the heavens themselves had forgotten their purpose. No sun rose, no night fell, only a dim light that rose slowly from beneath the sea, wrapping the stone buildings in a glow that felt like breathing. People still walked, still spoke, still performed the rituals of daily life-lighting fires, fetching water, carving on stone. Yet every movement felt slow, weightless. Time had lost its shape, floating between space and awareness. An, who had been silent by the pool, began to speak again. His voice was soft, like a whisper through a wall of water. He no longer spoke in a language people could understand. Instead, he uttered tones that flowed like an endless chant without beginning or end. The elders listened, but did not interpret, knowing the words were not meant for them. Some children sat around Yuan, watching their reflections in the shimmering blue water. In those reflections, they saw other versions of themselves older, calmer like shadows of a future that had already happened in the past. The sea now touched the base of the tallest tower. Its sound was gentle, like a hand caressing the face of a sleeping child. Each night, the surface of the water glowed with silver light, reflecting stars that no longer existed in the sky, as if the ocean had created its own heavens. Beneath the surface, voices began to murmur, not echoes, but speech formed from currents moving between the city's ruins. The guardians wrote one final note before their stone books dissolved. If the sea speaks, do not answer, only listen, for it is not calling, it is remembering. That night, something vast rose from beneath the city. The silver light that once circled the pool now radiated from the seabed, forming a slow-turning spiral of luminous energy. The buildings trembled softly, not from an earthquake, but like a body drawing its first breath after a long sleep. From the spiral emerged tall columns of water reaching toward the sunless sky, bursting into glowing mist. Those who saw it did not run. They simply stood, then began to walk toward the sea, one by one, entering the water quietly, as if returning home. Unfollowed. Behind him, the silver pool closed gently, reflecting a sky without boundaries. As his face disappeared beneath the waves, the entire city shuddered once, then fell still. There were no cries, no ruin, only the long exhale of a world closing its eyes. Moments later, Lemuria vanished from the surface. The sea took it back without sound. Yet from afar, those standing on high cliffs could sometimes see a faint glow beneath the waves, like a city breathing in its sleep. On calm nights, under a full moon, a faint song could still be heard, carried by the wind like the earth remembering something it once loved but could never truly keep. Since that day, the sea around that region has always been calm. No storms rise there, no ships sink. The water is too clear, too quiet. Fishermen who dare to cast their nets there often claim to hear footsteps beneath the waves, or whispers calling names they do not know. They call it the sleeping sea, for its surface lies still, like the face of someone dreaming a long dream. No one knows if UN and the people of Lemuria still live below, or if they have become the sea itself. Some believe the city never sank, but shifted into a deeper realm, where time does not move, only circles softly within the current of unending awareness. Others believe they became the song itself, the soft echo that keeps the waves whispering forever. Lemuria did not vanish, it merely went quiet, and within that silence, life still pulses, waiting for the world to remember it once more. After Lemuria sank and the sea became a perfect mirror, the world slowly began to forget. No records remained. No stones stood upon the land. Only the breath of wind, carrying a faint, salty scent like the exhale of a world that no longer existed. Yet the ocean did not forget. It kept every shadow, every sound, every last step that had ever touched its surface. In the depths, untouched by light, a slow pulse continued, as though the city had not truly died. The fish that lived in those waters bore strange colors, pale blue with streaks of silver, and their bodies glowed in the dark, reflecting a light that came from somewhere far below. Sailors who passed through those waters spoke of faint glimmers at the seabed, like fallen stars that never returned to the sky. On land, the story of Lemuria lived only through whispers, different in every land. In the southern coasts of Asia, fishermen called it the sacred land that vanished, where the first humans learned to speak to water. In the distant Western Isles, elders told of a proud continent that drowned itself, and every great storm was said to be the breath of Lemuria trying to rise again. In Africa, old storytellers claimed the sea spirits guarding the shore were born from that lost people beings, half human, half light seen, only when the tides reached their highest. For thousands of years, the sea remained silent. It revealed nothing, guarding its secrets in the endless dark. Yet ancient travelers, early sailors, and monks who wrote within caves said that on nights of perfect calm, one could hear a faint ringing from the southwest, a sound that came from beneath the waves. It was not a warning nor a call, but a greeting too old to understand. They called it the tone of a dreaming sea. Centuries later, when the world began to map continents, there was one point in the great ocean that no one could measure. Sailors who dropped their anchors there said their ropes never touched bottom, as though the sea had no end. The water was always warmer at that point, and on certain nights, bubbles of light rose to the surface before vanishing again. Some said these were not bubbles, but Lemuria's breath signs the city still lived, still breathing softly beneath the silence of millennia. There were also tales of ships lost in that region. Some reappeared months later, drifting without crew, their sails torn but with no sign of violence. Only pools of glassy water covered their decks, shimmering faintly, and a humming sound lingered in the air even when the wind was still. Those who found them swore they heard a song soft, repeating as if it wanted to be remembered. The ships were left to drift away once more, for no one dared bring them to port. Modern scientists tried to find explanations. They brought submarines, sensors, cameras, and sonar to map the seabed. Yet each time they reached a certain depth, their instruments failed. Compasses spun, signals vanished, and sometimes the screens showed shapes that should not exist: pillars, walls, symmetrical patterns beneath the sand. They returned with confusion and incomplete notes. Some believed it was all geological illusion, tricks of light and current, while others were certain they had only touched the edge of something greater, something that did not wish to be found. Now Lemuria exists only between theory and myth. But there is a difference between myths created by humans and those born from the memory of the earth. The first is a story born of the need to understand. The second is an echo that never fades. The sea knows the difference, and perhaps that is why it has chosen silence. There are certain nights when the sea feels different. The waves, which usually move with their natural rhythm, begin to tremble softly, as if listening to something deep within themselves. On those nights, the surface of the water turns perfectly still, like a vast mirror holding the sky above it. And from beneath rises a gentle greenish glow, drifting, slowly fading, as if shy to be seen by human eyes. Fishermen who find themselves at sea during such nights call it the ancient breath. When Lemuria speaks to the sea that swallowed it, they never light their lamps when it happens, for man-made light is believed to wound the memory of the ocean. They sit in silence, letting time move, listening to the whispers of the waves that sound like words in a language they never learned. In that darkness, some claim to have seen great shapes beneath the surface. Not fish or whales, but something still, geometric, like the roof of a temple or a stone gate slowly opening. Around it, colonies of luminous plankton swirl, creating rings of light that look like carvings on a primordial ceiling. One fisherman swore he saw stone steps stretching upward from the deep, reaching a place where light and dark met. But when he approached, it vanished, leaving only calm ripples and an air that felt heavier than before. The phenomenon is not new. In the journals of 15th century Portuguese sailors, there are tales of the glowing sea at night in the uncharted waters of the Indian Ocean. They wrote of sounds like the singing of women rising from below, songs that made the water tremble gently around their ship. The sailors called it Mar das Vozes, the Sea of Voices. No one knew where the sound came from, but after leaving the area, several men aboard claimed to have dreamed of a shining city beneath the waves, where light came from stone and trees grew in salt water. Modern scientists tried to explain it all logically. They spoke of bioluminescence, water pressure, and the acoustic resonance of undersea mountains. Yet none could answer why the sound only appeared on certain nights, or why some ships that recorded it lost their data, as if the sound had swallowed the memory of their machines. Some wave experts believed it was a result of trapped seismic echoes within layers of water. But even that theory could not explain why the recorded tones always formed an organized harmony rather than random noise. In some coastal regions, rituals are still performed when the sea begins to glow. People light incense on the shore, scatter flowers upon the waves, and let their soft songs drift into the night. They believe the light is the spirit of an ancient people still guarding the balance of the sea. An elder from a small island once said that Lemuria never truly sank, it simply shifted into a layer beyond time's reach. Each time the sea glows, it means they are still trying to remember us, even though we have long forgotten them. For some, this is only a legend. Yet for those who have been at sea and felt the air change, who have known water that seems alive, the story is more than myth. The ocean feels like a window left slightly open to an unfinished age, and beneath it, something still moves, slowly waiting for its moment to speak again. No one knows when it will happen, or if humanity will be ready to listen. Perhaps Lemuria never vanished. Perhaps it waits still, between the dark and the light, where time halts and memory never fades. During a strange summer in 1902, a group of Japanese pearl divers in the Andaman Sea reported something they had never seen before. At a depth of about 100 meters, among the massive silent rocks, they found shapes that defied explanation. Stone walls with perfectly cut edges stood upright in formations too orderly to be natural. Some formed circular patterns like a giant mandala leading toward a center where a flat stone resembled an altar. The stones did not match the local geology, and their surfaces bore traces of intense heat, as if they had been melted and reshaped. The divers tried to bring small fragments to the surface, but each time they did, the underwater currents grew suddenly strong. and the water turned murky until visibility vanished completely, as though the sea itself refused to let anything escape its depths. Years later, similar reports came from British divers researching the wreck of an ancient merchant ship in the same waters. They found a straight stone road extending as far as the eye could see, built from evenly sized blocks, placed tightly, without gaps. When they measured its length, the results made no sense. The road had no end. Each time they returned to continue the measurement, the section they had already marked seemed to have shifted farther away, like a shadow moving when one tries to grasp it. One diver wrote in his notes that he felt as though he was walking not on a path through space, but on a path through memory. Artifacts later recovered added new layers to the mystery. There was a metallic disc engraved with intricate patterns resembling a star map. Yet the constellations did not correspond to any known to modern astronomy. Some experts suggested it might depict a sky from before the Earth's axial shift, or perhaps from a star system no longer visible from our planet. Nearby, they found what appeared to be a stone musical instrument that, when lightly struck, emitted a long, vibrating tone that caused the surrounding water to ripple softly. Researchers called it the Lemurian resonator, though there was no concrete proof linking it to Lemuria beyond the coincidence of location and old sailor tales. In 1968, an American expedition used sonar to map the ocean floor in the same area. The results shook the archaeological world. Beneath the waves lay vast rectangular patterns, the distances between them too symmetrical to be natural. Part of the shape resembled the layout of an ancient city, complete with what looked like surrounding walls and a massive eastern gate. When the data was published, some scientists dismissed it as sonar illusion, but others saw in it evidence that the sea level was once much lower and that a lost civilization once stood there. At several universities, archaeologists attempted to piece together the fragments of this story, but they faced the wall of time. No historical record could explain such advanced craftsmanship in early human eras. No known culture possessed the ability to cut and place stone of that size with such precision. Even the alternative theories invoking extraterrestrial aid were too far-fetched for academia to accept. Yet the mystery persisted. There was something in the imperfection of history that continued to call out to human curiosity. When the latest dives were conducted in the early 21st century using underwater drones, they found something that halted the entire project. The cameras captured a half-buried stone face resting in the sand. Its eyes were closed, its expression serene, and on its forehead was carved the same spiral symbol found on ancient stone jars in Sri Lanka. There were no signs of heavy erosion, meaning the sculpture could not be as old as the surrounding rock. The question arose, had this civilization truly sunk thousands of years ago? Or did it rise and vanish in cycles we cannot yet understand? The sea offered no reply. It only murmured in the sound of its currents, carrying fine sand to cover once more what had been seen. The researchers recorded, measured, and returned home with more questions than answers. It was as if the ocean were waiting, guarding its truth, willing to reveal only small fragments to those who approached with patience rather than force. In those depths, perhaps history was not merely a record of the past, but a consciousness asleep, waiting to awaken again. The following years brought more shadows than light. In the 1980s, research teams from various universities tried to reconstruct a historical framework that might explain the existence of underwater structures in the Andaman Sea and the Indian Ocean. Yet, whenever they came close to a conclusion, their data unraveled into baffling inconsistencies. The sediment temperature readings did not match the age of the rocks. Isotopic analyses of the surrounding water revealed chemical shifts that should have been impossible without technological interference. Even the sonar maps redrawn each year showed subtle shifts in shape, as if the seafloor itself were breathing and slowly rearranging under human observation. In the silence of laboratories, scientists began to realize that they were studying something not only ancient, but also alive in a way that science could not explain. At a marine geology lab in Tokyo, an ocean geologist named Haruto Ishikawa once wrote a private journal note. He claimed that the sea south of India had a specific resonance pattern found nowhere else. Whenever low-frequency sound waves were transmitted into those depths, their echoes formed spiraling patterns that drifted northeastward. He compared it to an echo trying to return to its source, but lost between dimensions. Ishikawa died years later in a strange diving accident. When his body was recovered, the pressure gauge he carried displayed extreme readings, suggesting he had descended to twice the safe depth limit for humans, even though the dive log recorded otherwise. Around the same time in England, an independent researcher named Eleanor March published a paper that later became legendary among alternative archaeologists. She argued that the underwater ruins were not remnants of a single civilization, but rather overlapping traces from multiple epochs erased cyclically by cataclysms. She called this concept geological memory. In her theory, the Earth not only records history through rock and fossil, but also through the shape of space itself. As time passes, the planet occasionally reveals fragments from eras that should no longer exist, like a recurring dream. The idea was fiercely rejected by academia, but some young scientists privately called it one of the most poetic hypotheses ever proposed. Several later expeditions tried to merge scientific methods with spiritual observation. In 1997, a team of Indian and French researchers brought Tibetan monks to meditate aboard a research vessel anchored directly above the coordinates of the submerged structure. They believed human consciousness could unlock informational frequencies stored in water. For several hours, the monks sat in silence while sonar readings recorded faint fluctuations in the acoustic patterns below them. No one could explain the anomaly, yet the data showed rhythmic oscillations resembling a slow heartbeat. Once the meditation ended, the ocean returned to stillness. One scientist present said he felt as though the place had just taken a long breath before falling back asleep. Behind all the published reports, however, there were stories that never reached scientific journals. A research technician once claimed to have seen faint glimmers deep in the dark water, when all lights on the ship were turned off to conserve power. The lights were not marine phosphorescence or ordinary bioluminescence. They shimmered in silvery blue pulses, like veins of light beating in the sea. He watched for several minutes before the glow faded into quiet darkness. When he reported it, the captain only said the ocean often played tricks on perception. Yet the image of that light never left him. Researchers kept coming and going. Each generation left behind trails of data, hypotheses, and the same confusion. Perhaps they were not only searching for a sunken city, but also for a mirror in which to see themselves. Lemuria, Mu, or whatever name the place once bore, was only the projection of humanity's longing for something older than memory. A civilization that might still breathe between the waves, waiting for someone calm enough to hear it speak. At the dawn of the 21st century, advances in higher resolution, sonar, and deep-sea satellite mapping opened a new chapter in the search for Lemuria. In 2003, a joint team from Japan, India, and Australia launched the Oceanic Memory Survey, an international mission to trace remnants of ancient civilizations believed to be hidden beneath the Indian Ocean. The project was initially designed as a geotectonic study, but its focus shifted when the team discovered a peculiar geometric pattern at a depth of 3,500 meters. The formation resembled a network of interconnected canals arranged in concentric spirals, too orderly to be natural. Scientists attempted to explain it as the result of geological stress, but the precision of its symmetry suggested deliberate design. In a classified report later leaked to the public, it was stated that the formation reflected acoustic waves at frequencies unknown in any natural rock on Earth. During the mission, researchers began reporting anomalies that defied conventional oceanic physics. Stable currents abruptly reversed. Water temperatures rose several degrees within minutes, and communication systems experienced signal interference unrelated to any known satellite or electromagnetic source. In one recorded incident aboard the research vessel Tamaris, the entire sonar system went offline for 18 minutes, then returned, displaying a seabed landscape completely different from before. No one could explain how the terrain could shift so suddenly. Several team members swore they saw faint streaks of light moving across the monitor, as if the structures below were subtly reacting to their presence. One scientist, Dr. Neelam Kapoor, wrote in her journal that the place seemed sentient. She wrote, "We are not studying the sea. The sea is studying us." The entry was discovered after the official project was discontinued. Kapoor vanished during her final expedition in 2007. Her vessel was later found drifting near the Maldives, its instruments still running, but without a single crew member aboard. In the control room, only one thing was recovered: a 43-second audio recording of a low hum that resembled a distant breath within the water. By 2010, a new group of researchers attempted to continue the exploration using more advanced equipment. They deployed oceanic drones capable of withstanding extreme depths. Yet each time the devices approached the main coordinates, their magnetic sensors failed and navigation systems froze. The footage retrieved showed only a haze of fine golden particles obscuring the view. In one fragment, a massive pillar appeared smooth as glass, over 200 meters tall, standing upright among coral ridges, reflecting a faint, pulsating glow like a sleeping eye. The pillar's material was never identified. Spectroscopic analysis revealed a composition inconsistent with any known element. From this point, a radical new theory emerged, shaking the foundations of marine archaeology. Some scientists began to suspect that what they had found was not a drowned city, but rather an ancient machine remnants of a civilization that understood Earth's energy on a level beyond current comprehension. They called it the oceanic engine, proposing that it once stabilized the planet's rotation or regulated its magnetic field. When the system failed, cataclysmic shifts may have altered the climate, currents, and even the orbit of Earth, causing the submersion of the continent now known only through myth. Yet quieter voices spoke differently. These were the divers who had seen the site with their own eyes. They didn't talk about machines or technology. They spoke of presence, something soft, sentient, and vast. They said the sea there felt different, warmer even at crushing depths, as if it remembered. Some describe the sensation of being called by something gentle, a whisper in an unknown language. Everyone who returned from that place said the same thing. They could never look at the ocean the same way again. They carried a strange silence with them, as if part of themselves had remained below, alongside something not yet ready to be found. In 2012, a group of independent divers calling themselves the Abyss Seekers decided to investigate the same coordinates where the Tamaris expedition had vanished. They were not scientists, but a mix of deep-sea adventurers, diving engineers, and former military personnel obsessed with the mysteries of the ancient ocean. Armed with a small vessel and commercial-grade sonar equipment, they reached the area long avoided by major research institutions. Their logbook recorded the first report of blue luminescence beneath the waves that appeared only at night, shimmering up from the deep as if a light from the Earth's core were calling. The divers referred to the phenomenon as the calling light, describing it as both terrifying and magnetic, as though something below the surface was trying to speak. One of the divers, Rodrigo Velasquez, described in a 2014 documentary interview that when he approached the source of the glow around 2,800 meters deep, he found a small spherical object about 30 centimeters in diameter, suspended amid the sediments. It emitted a gentle light from within, not reflected, but alive, like a breathing pulse. When Rodrigo tried to touch it, all communication systems in his helmet abruptly shut down. He claimed to hear a faint voice inside his head, not like a human voice, but a vibration resonating directly in his skull. The words were brief, yet unforgettable. Not yet. The team managed to bring the sphere to the surface after a chaotic struggle against sudden pressure fluctuations. Once out of the water, the object's light slowly faded. Experts who examined it found that it was made of neither metal nor stone, nor any known synthetic material. Its surface felt like living tissue, yet contained no DNA or biological structure. When transferred to a laboratory in Chennai for further study, every electrical device in the room shut down for nearly 2 hours, and electromagnetic readings spiked to absurd levels higher than those produced by a small nuclear reactor. Days later, the sphere vanished from the laboratory without any trace. The room had been locked from the inside and guarded by the Indian military. CCTV footage captured something surreal. At 2:47 a.m., the sphere began to vibrate gently, then slowly faded, like mist dissolving into light rather than physically disappearing. The official investigation yielded no explanation, but soon after, sonar frequencies in the same region of the Indian Ocean changed. Acoustic waves that had once been steady now produced a rhythmic pulse, repeating endlessly, as if something deep below had awakened. Since that event, unverified reports began flooding in from fishing and cargo ships. Crews claimed to hear singing from the depths, long, harmonious, and hauntingly serene. Some described it as a sound that makes the heart heavy yet peaceful. Others reported sudden compass malfunctions. In certain sea lanes, their needles spinning on their own, pointing toward the same coordinates where Dr. Kapoor and the Tamaris vanished. Sailors eventually gave the region an unofficial name, the Luminous Grave. After the sonar frequency shift was detected, oceanographers around the world began noticing strange patterns in global geophysical data. Earth's magnetic field, which normally fluctuated smoothly and predictably, started showing small, rhythmic disturbances that matched the same interval as the pulse coming from the Indian Ocean's depths. At first, it was dismissed as a local anomaly, but weeks later, the same pattern appeared on sensors in the South Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The pulse was identical everywhere, like an echo traveling through the planet's core. The astrophysics lab in Zurich even reported that the low-frequency signal could be picked up by their radio instruments, meaning the vibration was penetrating not only the oceans, but the Earth's magnetosphere. Scientists were baffled, since no seismic, volcanic, or human activity could generate such synchronized resonance. Some experts proposed bold hypotheses. A Russian geologist, Viktor Arsenev, suggested that the pulse might originate from an ancient structure on the seafloor, still electromagnetically active, some kind of resonant machine left by a prehistoric civilization. He compared it to old theories of an Earth resonator supposedly used by ancient people to stabilize the planet's energy field. Meanwhile, NASA and the European Space Agency remained silent, though leaked internal reports mentioned minor but measurable effects on communication satellite orbits near the equator. The satellites showed directional drift of a few millimeters whenever the sonar waves peaked, as if pulled by something unseen. The phenomenon soon drew international attention. In November 2013, United Nations held a closed meeting in Geneva under the disguised topic Transoceanic Geotectonic Anomalies. Leaked documents revealed that several nations had begun to worry about the possible awakening of unexplained underwater activity. Rumor has it that one of Japan's delegates uttered a word not recorded in the minutes, Lemuria. The room reportedly fell silent for several minutes. No one responded, but soon after that meeting, an international underwater research project in the Indian Ocean was abruptly halted without explanation. Outside official circles, a new online movement emerged, calling themselves the Echo Observers. They collected and shared frequency data from various ocean monitoring stations. In a short time, the community discovered that the pulse was not merely rhythmic, but also contained variations, forming an ordered sequence, almost resembling Morse code. When converted into audio, it produced a faint melodies, low, repetitive, and oddly soothing. Members of the group began to believe the pulse wasn't natural, but a message. Many scientists dismissed this as imaginative amateurism, yet something strange persisted. People from different parts of the world began reporting identical dreams visions of a vast ocean. glowing with gentle blue light beneath the waves. In their dreams, they heard a soft voice speaking in an unknown language, yet everyone claimed to understand its meaning, a call to remember something long forgotten. The reports came from people with no connection to one another, from different continents, but with the same description. At this point, the scientific and the mystical began to overlap in uncomfortable ways. One side sought explanation through data and charts, the other through symbols and ancestral memory. Between them lay a long silence, as if making room for something older than both, a quiet rhythm still pulsing in the heart of the earth, calling, waiting, perhaps remembering that humanity was not the first to hear it. After the mystery of the undersea pulse broke into the news and online forums, a new wave of fascination arose toward the sounds from Earth's depths. In small laboratories and basement workshops of independent researchers, various experiments began to imitate the vibration pattern. They called their effort the reverse resonance protocol. The goal sounded simple, though it felt like trying to speak to a world that didn't want to answer, to send a return wave toward the source, hoping that something down there might respond. In Tokyo, a marine acoustics expert named Kato Hoshino designed an experimental sonar device with a titanium disc capable of emitting ultra-low frequencies, almost inaudible to human ears. He installed it on the Okinawa coast, aimed toward the coordinates where the pulse was first detected. For 3 weeks, he heard nothing. Then, on the 24th night, the instrument recorded an identical but fainter echo, like a reply from a distance that couldn't be measured. Across the world, in the Azores Islands, a team of researchers from Portugal and Canada built a similar device using electromagnetic waves instead of sonar. They believed the source of the vibration might not be acoustic, but rather an energy field mirroring the Earth's own nature. When the device was activated, magnetometers around them showed a small but steady increase. And the fish nearby suddenly began swimming in circles, following a repeating pattern. One diver reported that the water felt slightly warmer and heavier, as if something was breathing slowly at the seafloor. Every time a human-made signal was sent, the world seemed to hold its breath. Hours after the Azores experiment, monitoring stations in the Indian Ocean reported a slight alteration in the original pulse. It no longer throbbed 3 times per minute, but twice, with one long pause that returned at regular intervals. The new pattern felt like a response, not aggressive. Not intrusive, simply a reminder that something down below was listening. Some scientists refused to connect the two, calling it statistical coincidence. Yet, in a small research room in Lisbon, someone stared at the sonar screen with tired eyes and whispered softly, "It heard us." The phenomenon sparked a wave of academic debate. European universities began forming special teams to study correlations between human experiments and changes. In the underwater rhythm, some physicists argued that low-frequency resonance might interact with Earth's mineral layers, creating a global echo effect. But that theory failed to explain the uniformity of the patterns in distant, unlinked regions. Outside the academic mainstream, a small group of open-minded researchers began to suggest that the pulse might represent communication between layers of planetary consciousness. They cited ancient texts from multiple civilizations describing the Earth's heartbeat or the breath of the ocean, a rhythm of life said to underlie nature's harmony. As the public learned that some small labs had received replies, many were inspired to create their own simplified devices. Online forums circulated designs for home transmitters, built from old speakers and digital frequency generators. Users claimed to hear faint hums at night, like a distant tone resonating deep in the inner ear. Most heard nothing, but a few felt something real. One man in Iceland wrote that after activating his homemade device, he dreamed of a city submerged in blue light, with tall towers of glassy stone and voices that spoke without words. He woke up with tears in his eyes, feeling as if he had returned to a place he had forgotten long ago. From there, the public narrative began to shift. What once was a story of geophysical anomaly became something that blurred the line between science and ancient memory. Many began to ask whether the world itself still carried the collective memory of civilizations that existed before recorded history. In that deep oceanic silence, something weighted, and humanity had just knocked on a door that had been closed for millions of years. When the undersea signal began to change form and reveal increasingly complex patterns, the world grew quiet, as if realizing that something vast was unfolding beyond human understanding. On monitoring screens from laboratories to research vessels, the wavelines no longer looked random. They began to form recurring structures, resembling sequences of symbols or a language never recorded on Earth. There were pauses, then a long vibration, followed by 3 short pulses, then silence. The pattern repeated for hours, yet every recording showed subtle variations, as if the sender was trying to refine its grammar. Some researchers called it a natural anomaly, but to those who looked deeper, it felt as if the sea itself was speaking in a tongue that humanity had yet to invent. Scientists across the world worked sleeplessly to interpret the vibration structure. In Norway, a geologist named Ingrid Solheim discovered that the timing ratio of the pulses matched the pattern of lunar movements and tidal cycles. In her notes, she wrote that perhaps what they were hearing wasn't just a message from the Earth's depths, but a harmonic echo between the sea, the sky, and something alive between them. Meanwhile, a team in Brazil converted the frequency pattern into a visual waveform, and the result was startling. The image resembled the spiral stone carvings found on Peru's ancient highlands. The geometry was too precise to be dismissed as coincidence. Governments in several countries began restricting public access to oceanic sensor data. The official reason cited national security, but rumors spread quickly. In private forums, leaks suggested that some of the newest signals contained patterns mirroring maps of ancient seafloors, including regions now hidden beneath deep trenches. One leaked dataset from an American oceanic project showed contours resembling an unknown continent located between East Africa and the Indian Ocean. Online communities soon named it the Lemurian Map. No proof could confirm its authenticity. Yet it was enough to reignite old legends about continents that sank before history began. Within weeks, other strange phenomena followed. Satellites monitoring the Earth's magnetic field recorded minor fluctuations in regions where the signal was strongest. Clouds began to form in gentle spirals above the ocean, and sailors reported faint auroras along the equator, something supposedly impossible. Amid the confusion, a small group of researchers from India and Egypt proposed a daring hypothesis. They wrote that the ocean might be trying to reactivate something long dormant. According to them, the frequency could be a kind of resonance key, unlocking a geological layer that once existed on the Earth's surface millions of years ago. But the most unsettling event came one June night, when the global sonar network recorded synchronized pulses echoing across the entire planet. They didn't emanate from a single point, but from multiple depths, as though all the world's oceans were breathing in the same rhythm. The sound lasted 20 minutes. Many people near coastlines claimed they could feel the vibration in their chests rather than hear it. In some places, the sea rose and fell slowly without any natural cause. A child on a beach in Madagascar told his mother that the ocean was calling a name he couldn't pronounce. When the night ended, few slept. They didn't know if they had just witnessed a warning, a greeting, or an awakening. What was certain was that the earth felt subtly changed, as if a new consciousness had begun to look back from beneath the waves. As the echo slowly faded from sonar networks around the world itself was no longer the same. In research centers, scientists who had worked tirelessly now sat in silence, staring at data screens that showed nothing but straight lines of total quiet. No more pulses, no vibrations, as if the sea had deliberately closed its mouth after speaking too much. In that silence, humanity split into two great beliefs. Some believed the signal was an invitation, a gentle call from an ancient civilization still hidden beneath the waves, waiting to be rediscovered. Others saw it as a warning, the Earth's last attempt to tell its children not to dig too deep into the past. Between these two views grew both fear and curiosity, equal in strength, like two waves racing toward each other, yet never colliding. The global debate soon became a spectacle. On one side, researchers from Japan, France, and Russia formed a new alliance called Project Resonance, aiming to locate the signal's original source. They built underwater stations at some of the ocean's deepest points, equipped with gravity sensors and acoustic transmitters designed to send messages back into the Earth's depths. On the other hand, philosophers and spiritual leaders from several nations founded a movement called the Ocean Silence, urging humanity to leave the deep undisturbed. They believed every vibration was an expression of the planet's consciousness, and responding to it would mean disturbing something sacred. The world became a vast stage for two opposing ideas, rooted equally in fear and wonder. Amid this turmoil, strange phenomena began to surface. Along remote coastlines, especially around the Indian and South Pacific Oceans, locals reported discovering carved stones that hadn't existed before. They appeared after unexplained high tides that receded slowly, leaving marks like inscriptions in sand but etched into solid rock. The carvings resembled waveforms, and from above, some formed enormous spirals. Many linked them to the recent underwater signals. While skeptics dismissed them as geological coincidences, others recorded faint electromagnetic traces emanating from the stones, inconsistent with local minerals. Tension rose when a recording leaked from a research vessel off the coast of Chile. The audio captured a faint harmony, a distant, choir-like hum that lasted only seconds before all electrical systems on board went dark. Crew members claimed they saw a blue light moving beneath the water, forming a perfect circle before vanishing into the deep. Afterward, the area was declared off-limits to researchers and labeled an anomaly zone, though officials provided no explanation. Whispers spread that something below had begun to respond again. Over time, people began to share strange similarities in their dreams. Across continents, individuals described standing by a tranquil shore at night, gazing at a horizon glowing with blue light, and hearing a soft voice calling a name they could not recall upon waking. Psychologists attributed it to global suggestion triggered by news saturation. Yet mystics believed the sea had opened a new window of communication beyond language or technology. In some places, new rituals emerged. People gathered by the ocean, lighting candles, sitting in silence, waiting for anything to answer from afar. The calm soon turned uneasy as reports from ships multiplied. Compasses spun aimlessly, clocks stopped, and ocean currents shifted without reason. Seasoned sailors who had known the sea all their lives said it now felt alive in a different way. They described its surface as breathing, expanding, and contracting slowly, as though remembering something long forgotten. Perhaps, they said, the sea had never been silent at all. It had only been waiting for humanity to be quiet enough to listen again. On the night Project Resonance finally decided to send its first reply signal, the world seemed to hold its breath. The main vessel, Argo Sentinel, floated in the middle of the Indian Ocean, directly above what was believed to be the source of the ancient echo. The sea was calm, almost glass-like, reflecting a starless sky. There was no wind, no seabirds, only the hum of the ship's engines and the quiet ticking of instruments in the control room. Scientists spoke in low voices, as if afraid of disturbing something greater than themselves. The frequency to be transmitted had been prepared for months, built from the patterns of the last recorded remnants of the ancient signal. No one knew what would happen. No one knew if anything below could even hear them, let alone respond. Yet the decision had been made, and the timer on the digital display counted down toward transmission. When it reached 0, the chief operator pressed the command button. A low-frequency pulse descended into the deep. No human ear could hear it, but the instruments showed a soft rise in amplitude, like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Everyone watched the monitors, waiting for any sign of response. 5 minutes passed, then 10, 20, an hour. Nothing changed. The sea remained still, like a giant creature sleeping too deeply to stir. Some researchers left their posts, resigned that this first attempt might join the long history of humanity's unanswered messages. Then, on the 3,945th second after transmission, the sensors jumped. The vibration came from a depth of more than 10 kilometers. The recorded waves weren't natural, not like earthquakes or currents. They carried a rhythmic order, a structured repetition reminiscent of language. 3 long pulses, 2 short, then a pause, and again. Scientists exchanged uneasy glances. The operator magnified the spectrogram, translating the frequency into a visual pattern. The display formed a spiral identical to the carvings found on the coastal stones months earlier. The room went dead silent. Even the ship's machinery seemed to quiet itself. No one moved until a voice from the deck intercom broke the stillness. "There is something beneath us." An underwater camera was lowered rapidly through the thick darkness. At about 9,000 meters, the lights caught faint shapes below. At first, they looked like mist, then slowly coalesced into glowing geometric patterns, like living constellations moving on the seafloor. With every pulse from below, the lights changed color from pale blue to soft green before fading again. The operator tried to focus the camera, but the video feed suddenly cut out. The final frame, captured just before blackout, showed what looked like a circular structure, nor metal, but something organic, as if the sea itself possessed a living heart pulsing in rhythm with the signal. Hours later, all communications failed. Radios went dead, GPS lost signal, and the ship's electrical systems flickered with strange interference. The compass rotated slowly, then fixed on the south, unmoving. From the depths came a low rumble, not like a storm, but like something immense, shifting far beneath the crust. One scientist whispered that they might have opened something that was meant to stay closed. The captain ordered transmission terminated and all equipment withdrawn. Yet, as the last camera was reeled in, the blue light returned, circling the ship in a perfect ring, pulsing gently until dawn. Afterward, Argo Sentinel returned to port in near silence. All data was sealed by the International Research Board. The official report simply stated a subsurface electromagnetic reaction was detected without significant environmental impact. But among the crew, rumors spread about one detail never recorded in any file. They all swore they heard something before the systems went dark, a soft voice rising from the water around the hull. The voice spoke one brief phrase in a language none could identify, yet when several wrote it from memory later, the word was the same in every version. Remember, the final message from the ocean's depths was never meant to leave the laboratory. Yet leaks can never be truly stopped, especially in an age where information moves faster than light through water. 2 months after the Argo Sentinel returned to port, a faint recording said to be from an electromagnetic interference appeared on dark internet forums, uploaded by someone claiming to be a backup technician from the ship's communication team. The sound fragment was a series of subtle vibrations, followed by a low hum that made many listeners uneasy for reasons they couldn't explain. Linguistic analysts examined its frequencies and found the pattern aligned with a nearly universal phonetic structure, as though the sound could be understood instinctively without translation. When slowed tenfold, the audio revealed what sounded like a whisper, soft, deliberate, unmistakably human. The voice seemed to call out, gentle yet firm, speaking a single word: remember. Public reaction split sharply. Some dismissed it as an elaborate modern hoax. Others hailed it as the first proof that humankind was not the only consciousness ever to dwell on Earth. Major media refused to air it. Yet mere copies of the video multiplied across every platform, amassing millions of views within days. The scientific community, fractured half, demanded further investigation, half-warned that obsession with the message could invite disaster. Official research agencies released calm statements claiming the recordings were unverifiable, but their refusal to deny them entirely only deepened the mystery. Soon a new movement appeared, calling themselves the Rememberers, a spiritual collective convinced that the voice was a call from before the dawn of civilization. They didn't call themselves a religion, but a fellowship of contemplation. They gathered on moonless nights by the shore, sitting in silence facing the sea, waiting for another echo. They believed the sender was not an alien from the stars, but the residual awareness of Earth itself, speaking through water and frequency. To them, the word remember was not a command, but a gentle invitation to recognize something long forgotten. Scientists who secretly observed their gatherings noted peculiar phenomena, at times when large groups meditated in silence. Seismographs along nearby coasts registered faint rhythmic tremors, as if the ocean responded to their stillness with its own quiet pulse. Governments began to grow uneasy. Amid global political strain and economic instability, a vast movement unbound by ideology or borders was seen as a threat. Some members of the Rememberers were arrested under charges of public disturbance, though most had done nothing but sit silently by the sea. Suppression only fueled their growth. In cities, murals of spirals appeared on walls and bridges. People began dreaming of water, of glowing cities beneath the waves, of voices calling from unseen depths. Psychologists called it a mass suggestive effect, though even a few of them admitted to hearing the same whisper in moments of silence. Over time, the ocean itself began to change. Currents that had been stable for centuries slowly reversed direction, forming faint whirlpools near the coordinates where Argo Sentinel once floated. Fishing crews reported blue lights under the water, neither plankton nor phosphorescence, but something pulsing in rhythm with the first recorded signal. Some ships tried to approach, but their navigation systems failed within a certain radius. Scientists quietly resumed small expeditions, this time without announcements. Yet none dared dive too deep. It was as if everyone already knew something below had awakened, waiting, no longer needing to be called. As the world fell into a strange, collective quiet, everything began to shift not through war or disaster, but through silence itself. People spoke less, as if afraid to disturb something that might be listening. The ocean became sacred without anyone declaring it so. Each shore felt like the boundary between two kinds of awareness. No one knew whether the message came from another being, from the planet itself, or from humanity's own voice echoing back. Yet that single word, remember, took on new meaning. It no longer pointed to the past, but to the realization that we were never truly alone, even when the world was utterly still. As the message took root in humanity's collective consciousness, the world quietly entered a phase no conventional science could explain. The first changes appeared almost in visibly dreams, becoming more frequent, strangely synchronized across continents. People described similar visions of walking underwater among vast stone structures illuminated by greenish light, touching walls that felt warm, alive. In these dreams, they did not drown, but breathed easily through soft currents. Scientists studying the phenomenon found that the sleeping brainwaves of participants matched the same low frequency. electromagnetic patterns detected in the deep sea where the message had originated. There was no logical explanation for such synchronization, unless something was indeed touching the subconscious of the entire species at once. Months later, biology itself began to shift. Geneticists in Iceland and Japan discovered small, identical mutations in mitochondrial DNA appearing simultaneously across unrelated populations. The mutations seemed to increase human tolerance to oxygen deprivation, especially around salt water. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence, yet repeated experiments confirmed the effect. Humanity appeared to be adapting to the ocean for no evolutionary reason. Skeptical scientists called it statistical noise. Others quietly concluded that perhaps something long buried within human bodies was awakening. Something responding to the ancient call to remember. The public's response was mixed. Some saw it as a blessing, a sign of preparation for a new phase of existence. Others saw a warning that something immense was coming, and the land was slowly losing its claim over humankind. Coastal cities filled with groups practicing underwater meditation, diving silently without equipment, seeking what they called the original pulse. The media coined the term aquatic awakening, though the rememberers rejected it. They said this was no awakening, but a return, a soft summoning from a presence that had always waited inside human genes, patient until the right moment to open its eyes again. Governments around the world silenced the conversation. Research on the new DNA was halted. Labs closed under the pretext of biosecurity, yet leaks persisted. Secret documents described the genetic pattern as nearly identical to that of deep-sea proto-human fossils once. Discovered in the Indian Ocean, tentatively named Homo pelagicus by a few daring archaeologists. That project had been abruptly canceled years earlier without explanation. Now, with similar mutations appearing in modern humans, speculation became unavoidable. Were humans and those ancient beings of the same lineage divided by time, and was the word remember simply a call to reunite what was once whole? Meanwhile, strangeness spread across the world. The ocean no longer felt like a boundary, but a mirror. People reported seeing reflections that moved slightly slower than their own, or faces that appeared older, wiser, gazing back not with fear, but melancholy. Psychologists dismissed it as visual dissonance, but those who experienced it knew otherwise. They felt watched not with malice, but with recognition, as if by someone who had missed them dearly. Soon the phenomenon extended beyond the sea. Rain in certain regions carried faint hums, only audible in perfect silence. Meteorological instruments recorded frequency patterns identical to the ocean's signal. It was as though air and water had begun to speak in the same tongue, and humanity stood between them, listening. Some began to believe the Earth was not merely a planet hosting life, but a living entity recalling itself through human memory. A few scientists labeled it planetary recall, though most dared not publish the term. Yet in quiet nights, even they admitted to hearing something when they looked upon the sea, a whisper so familiar it seemed to come from within their own bodies, reminding them that the beginning of all things was never truly lost, only sleeping, waiting for humanity to be silent enough to hear again. At this stage, time itself began to lose shape around the sea. Days no longer felt clearly separated, and fishermen across small islands reported phenomena that no calendar could explain. They claimed the sun sometimes rose twice in a single morning or set without ever leaving twilight behind. Waves moved with rhythms that defied the wind, as if another pulse guided the breath of the ocean. In the Indian Ocean, researchers documented what they called temporal drift local time distortions, causing their instruments to fall out of sync. Digital clocks aboard research vessels differed by 2 hours across less than a kilometer. No electromagnetic interference, no technical errors. It was as though time had become fluid, carried by currents unknown, and humans merely drifted upon its surface. Among these anomalies came personal accounts from divers. They reported hearing a kind of song at certain depths, wordless, soft, directionless, yet deeply moving, as if remembering something that had never happened. Some surfaced with tears, not from fear, but from the quiet ache of having touched something older than time. Divers from different nations described the same melody, long pauses between tones as though the song itself waited for an answer. No recording ever captured it. Once microphones entered the water, the sound vanished, aware of being watched. The phenomenon spread to land. Coastal dwellers experienced time distortion too. They claimed to walk briefly along the shore at dusk, only to return home past midnight. Some said the sea had once frozen, still no storm, no wind. Water halted, seabirds hung motionless in the air, and the world grew unnaturally silent. Witnesses described it as the moment when the planet held its breath, then exhaled slowly, bringing peace like the pause between two immense heartbeats. Physicists argued endlessly. Some said gravitational anomalies beneath the seafloor caused the distortions. Others believed the so-called planetary recall was not psychological or biological at all, but evidence that Earth was recalibrating itself to a more original form of time, nonlinear, circular, like a whirlpool where past and future flow together. A few spiritual researchers proposed that humanity was not descending into collapse, but returning to the frequency of the age when ocean and consciousness were one. Subtle signs appeared even far from the sea. Clocks in homes froze for seconds before resuming. The shadows of trees moved slower than the wind that stirred them. Children stared longer at horizons, as though expecting something to emerge. No one knew when it began or when it would end, yet the world grew quieter, not peaceful, exactly but suspended, waiting for something unnamed. Some communities still studying the underwater signal claimed that Earth had entered a pause phase, a period of collective realignment between human awareness and planetary rhythm. Perhaps, they wrote, this was how the planet healed, by loosening time's grip. In that stillness, humans became witnesses rather than masters. They realized that every triumph, every ambition, was only a faint echo within the breathing of an enormous sea. There was peace in that realization, a humility that did not wound but soothed. The world, it seemed, was remembering that it did not need to run to remain alive. At night, when all was silent, some swore they could hear a heartbeat not their own. Slow, deep, resonant from the earth, from the ocean. From the air itself, as though the world's heart had begun to beat slower, waiting for something to be born again. There was no fear in the sound, only intimacy, like resting inside a cosmic womb mid-dream. No one knew how long this pause would last. Yet many began to understand that when time loses meaning, one finally hears what has never been silent. As the pause stretched on, something beneath the sea began to stir, not with the speed of tides or the pull of currents, but with a movement almost invisible to human perception. Scientists stationed in deep-sea research posts reported shifts in water pressure that defied gravity and seismic logic. The pressure rose and fell in a steady rhythm, like breathing, as if the ocean floor itself inhaled and exhaled. Instruments once purely mechanical began to behave oddly. Needles quivered as if responding to something alive. Control panel lights pulsed in sync, and operators swore they heard faint thudding sounds between the hum of the machine's soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat from the Earth's own chest. Meanwhile, the surface of the sea changed color. It was no longer blue or gray, but a subtle blend of green and gold, as though something below was reflecting light upward. Fishermen sailing at night spoke of vast shadows moving beneath their boats, not whales or fish, but forms too geometric to be alive, like ruins drifting slowly across the seafloor. When the water calmed, they saw towers, walls, and corridors glowing faintly, not from any artificial light, but from luminescence within the stone itself. Among those shadows, they sometimes glimpsed colossal statues lying in repose, as if waiting for a signal to awaken. Divers who descended to see more described sensations that defied language. At certain depths, the water grew warmer, as if a massive heat source pulsed below, but not from magma or volcanism. The current seemed to flow outward from a single point, forming a subtle vortex that pushed rather than pulled. Within it shimmered a faint silvery light, pulsing like a planetary vein. One diver said it felt like standing before something that was thinking not as humans think, but as the ancient world remembers itself. Far away on the coasts, strange effects began to reach the land. Stones taken from ancient cliffs emitted gentle warmth at night, as if awakening. Sea creatures from the deep appeared at the surface, only to vanish at dawn. Scientists speculated this was linked to a phenomenon they called submarine resonance, a vast wave emanating from something enormous and unseen. Yet each attempt to trace its source failed. The signal shifted, eluding measurement, as if aware of being followed. All over the world, people began sharing the same dream. In it, they walked beneath the sea, breathing as though it were air. They wandered through coral-shrouded pillars, hearing soft voices calling their names in languages unknown. Sometimes they saw flashes of light far off, and within them, tall, pale figures stood watching, eyes reflecting the whole ocean. There was no fear in the dream, only an ancient longing, like remembering something the world had forgotten. Many of them began to draw what they saw, and strangely, their images matched circular cities beneath the waves. A vast glowing dome at the center, and towering statues facing the heavens. At the base of the dome lay a spiral carved into stone, winding inward to what some called the heart of Lemuria. Scholars of ancient symbols found the same spiral carved into rocks millions of years old on multiple continents. from Patagonia to Southeast Asia, as if the world itself once shared a single memory expressed in many forms. The world began to pay attention, not as curiosity, but as quiet recognition that history might be far longer than anyone imagined. Yet behind the fascination lingered a calm fear, the kind that comes not from danger, but from awe. The sense that something ancient and vast was truly awakening. The sea, with all its depths, began to move with a life of its own, and the earth trembled gently, aligning itself to a rhythm both alien and familiar. In the nights that followed, the sky above the ocean became something humanity had never seen. The stars seemed closer, as though the heavens themselves leaned down to watch the sea glowing from within. Deep beneath those nameless waters, miles below the surface, something began to emit light, not a blinding fire, but a slow, living radiance that rose through the water like a memory breathing. Its hue could not be defined, shifting between pale blue, jade green, and faint gold, pulsing like the rhythm of a colossal heart. Satellites passing overhead recorded the image, a vast glowing ring slowly spinning at the ocean floor. There were no earthquakes, no tidal waves, only a subtle vibration that spread outward until it was felt on faraway shores. Coastal dwellers reported strange changes that night. Seabirds did not fly as usual. Instead, they circled the beaches, calling in tones that sounded less like cries and more like replies. In certain coves, the ocean stilled to glass, and beneath its surface shimmered the outline of a luminous city. Children staring into the water said they heard distant singing, soft, wordless, and impossibly ancient. The elders heard nothing, yet felt a gentle weight in their chests, as though a forgotten name had been whispered through their bones. Scientists launched unmanned vessels toward the light. The cameras revealed a breathtaking sight. Beneath the trenches stood massive, circular structures, and at their center a crystalline dome, rotating slowly in harmony with unseen currents. Spirals were carved along its surface, glowing softly as if carrying a message. The light pulsed in a rhythm that was not illumination, but communication, a silent language of waves and geometry. The instruments kept recording, but the footage warped seconds stretched into minutes, and shadows of giant human-like figures appeared between the structures, walking slowly, vanishing whenever approached. Across the world, compasses spun freely. Mechanical clocks paused for several seconds at the exact same moment before resuming with strange precision. Many reported that their own heartbeats seemed to align with an external rhythm, something vast and buried deep. In silent houses, windows trembled faintly. In the night sky, delicate lines of light formed a spiral identical to that carved on the dome below. What united all who witnessed it was not fear, but quiet recognition, a sense that something older than time had awakened. Some believed the light was not a signal to be found, but a memory to be remembered. Myths from different lands spoke of this, that when the earth forgets itself, something from its depths calls the balance back. Islanders of the Pacific called it the breath of the world. Himalayan monks called it the hidden heart. Now those names converged into one meaning, the call of Lemuria, the city that never wished to be remembered, yet refused to be forgotten. When the night reached its darkest point, the light flared once more, then vanished, like a breath drawn before sleep. Instruments ceased recording. The ocean stilled. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, as quietly as it began, the sea returned to darkness. The stars resumed their distance, and only a faint vibration in the air remained. Those who were there swore that in the silence after the light faded, they heard it a vast, gentle heartbeat echoing through the deep, as if the earth itself had closed its eyes and begun to dream again. After the night of the great light, the world seemed normal again. The waves rolled in their usual rhythm. Birds found their way home, and the air carried the same cool breath as before. Yet something had shifted, subtly but undeniably. It was not the sky nor the sea, but the silence that had changed the kind of stillness that rests between one breath and the next. In several places, especially near the southern oceans, currents began to drift, changing direction with quiet purpose. Flows that had moved west for millennia now curved northward, as if seeking something unseen. Scientists recalculated their models, but the results changed daily, as though invisible hands were redrawing the world's pulse. Research vessels still daring to enter those waters reported a low, rhythmic sound from the depths. There was no constant frequency, only a slow, recurring vibration, like the breathing of something vast. Each recording came at a different hour, depending on the region. Yet, when plotted on a global map, the timestamps formed a single spiral pattern curling from the Indian Ocean toward the South Pacific, ending near the point believed to be Lemuria's heart. Whether coincidence or message, no one could say, but those who listened described it as musical. Archaeoacoustic experts analyzed the recordings and discovered something stranger. The sound waves did not remain in the water. They moved through the crust of the earth, reflecting under continents, reappearing in volcanic stone and caverns. A lab in Iceland detected it within cooled lava. Another in Peru recorded the same pulse inside ancient caves near Nazca. The pattern was identical everywhere, as though the planet itself hummed in a single subterranean harmony. Some even suggested the frequency calmed the human nervous system. Along coasts where it was strongest, stress levels mysteriously dropped, and many people dreamed vivid dreams of glowing cities, undersea gardens, and spiraling crystal towers slowly turning in the current. In these dreams, people walked along smooth stone streets beneath a sky without a sun. Tall figures moved in silence, cloaked in garments that shimmered faintly at their edges. There were no voices, only a presence, vast and shared, as though thought itself had become collective. The most common vision was of a great circle at the center of the sea where it all began. There stood a pillar of light, with symbols flowing around it, changing shape and rhythm. Scholars compared these imagined symbols to ancient carvings, and were stunned to find echoes of them in Mohenjo-Daro, Nazca, and Easter Island. The reports multiplied until the world began to take notice. Few dared speak the word Lemuria, as if the name itself might awaken something. Yet in quiet rooms, the discussion grew. Some said it was the earth communicating, restoring equilibrium after a long imbalance. Others claimed it was not the earth at all, but a living remnant beneath it, something waiting for memory to call it back. Through all of this ran a single feeling: peace. Despite the deepening strangeness, no fear arose. Those who witnessed it felt an inexplicable calm, as if the world were remembering something gentler than truths, something that can only be felt when all noise fades. The dreams became more frequent, and gradually they took on a shared pattern. People from distant continents, speaking different languages and living lives that had never intersected, began describing the same visions with astonishing detail. They dreamed of vast plains crowned by white towers gleaming like ivory, oceans glimmering beyond the horizon, and a silver sky without a sun. At the center of the plains was always a great circle made of smooth black stone, where water seeped through narrow cracks, forming glowing signs that moved like written light. No one knew what they meant, yet in those dreams, everyone felt an intimate recognition, as if an ancient language once known to humanity had been reawakened from within their blood. At several universities, neuroscientists began studying the phenomenon. They discovered that during these dreams, the brain emitted extraordinarily low-frequency waves, close to the boundary where consciousness slips into the threshold between sleep and death. Strangely, these frequencies were identical to the underwater acoustic waves recorded months earlier in the Indian Ocean. It was as though an unseen dialogue was unfolding between the earth and the human mind, between water and memory, between the present and a time that never had a name. Meanwhile, deep beneath the ocean surface, abandoned research sensors detected new anomalies. At depths beyond 6,000 meters in valleys untouched by light, there appeared a slow-moving heat source stretching almost 50 kilometers long, ending in a dome-shaped formation. Geologists first suspected volcanic activity, yet there was no gas, no magma, and the structure remained stable for weeks. The surrounding temperature rose slightly, just enough to melt the thin crust, creating small circular currents. From orbit, satellites recorded faint blue flashes at the same spot each ocean night, like the slow pulse of something vast and dreaming. Across many ancient shorelines, people began hearing sounds they could not explain. Not the rush of wind or the roll of waves, but a soft tone rising from the ground itself, as if the planet were singing. It would appear between the rhythm of tides, echo in caves, or hum deep in the bones of those who lingered near the water. Children were most sensitive to it. They said they heard songs, and when they closed their eyes, they saw glowing cities beneath the sea. Adults dismissed it as imagination, though in secret, many began dreaming the same way. Soon, the world grew strangely quiet. News stopped speaking of war and politics, as if those things had lost meaning. People preferred to sit by the shore, listening to something unheard, searching for sense in the coming and going of waves. No one understood how civilization could shift so gently, but it happened without law or command, guided by curiosity. The same curiosity that once led humanity from caves that lit the first fire, and now perhaps was guiding them to remember something ancient beyond words. Writers and poets began recording these experiences, calling it the awakening of water, or the age of hearing again. None dared to define its source. They only noted that the world felt alive again, more aware, as if the planet itself were breathing after a long sleep. In this new quiet, Everything felt connected, the heartbeat of humans. The rhythm of tides, the whisper of wind through trees, the resonance within dreams. No one could explain it, yet no one feared it. Instead, all felt calm, as though they had returned home to a place they had forgotten long ago. Then came the day when something finally changed in the physical world. It was no longer confined to dreams or faint sounds. Became visible, measurable, undeniable. In certain parts of the ocean, especially near the equator, the water began to glow faintly at night, not from plankton or artificial light, but from something rising from within the earth itself. The blue was not the color of the sea. It shimmered like molten metal reflecting moonlight. Ships passing through those waters reported strange disruptions in their compasses and navigation systems, as if Earth's magnetic field had been split. Scientists called it the spherical anomaly, but old fishermen from distant islands named it the first water sign. They said the sea was opening its eyes. In the nights that followed, the phenomenon spread. Across the globe, shorelines began to pulse with a dim, rhythmic light, like the slow beating of a heart. People stood by the coast, watching the glowing water rise and fall like breath. There was no fear, only a calm that sank deep into the chest, the feeling of being held by something ancient and patient. In some places, the water rose, not as waves, but as thin veils, standing upright before falling again without sound. Sea creatures surfaced without distress. Fish swam closer to land. Whales sang longer, their tones stretching higher than ever recorded. The world seemed to be preparing for something like an orchestra, waiting for its conductor to lift his hand. Then came another mystery that silenced everyone. In dry valleys and old plains, water began to emerge from the ground, not as rain, but as thick mist that condensed into pools within hours. In the center of each pool stood an oval black stone, human-sized, emitting a deep hum that could be felt in the bones. There was no heat, no danger, yet its vibration felt like an echo from a time never written. The stones were later called keepers, for anyone who stood too close began to see fleeting visions, faces of strangers, places unmarked on any map, moments that felt both familiar and impossible. Researchers tried to remove one for study, but every attempt failed. The stones resisted touch. Machines shut down, metal corroded, even laser beams reflected back untouched. Only water interacted with them. When a droplet touched their surface, the stones emitted a gentle radiance, revealing symbols identical to those seen in dreams. The same flowing letters of water, the primal script written upon the skin of the world. The night those symbols first shone, the planet seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, humanity realized they were witnessing something that did not belong to the future, but to a forgotten dawn. There were no screams, no panic. Only the slow dawning awareness that they were standing at the threshold of something older than memory, larger than history, and more real than the world they thought they knew. In the weeks that followed, the world grew quieter than it had been in centuries. There were no wars, no riots in the cities, as if all of humanity collectively waited for something that no one could describe. Sailors at sea began reporting new anomalies. The black stones, known as the keepers, seemed to vibrate in unison at specific hours, as though communicating in a language beyond human hearing. The vibration rippled through the water, down to the ocean floor, and echoed within ancient caves long sealed by time. In some of these caves, the echoes awakened dormant carving symbols, glowing like living embers, forming identical patterns across continents. It became clear that the stones were not isolated artifacts, but fragments of a vast global network hidden beneath the skin of the modern world. Deep in arid deserts, beneath heavy layers of sand, expeditions uncovered similar formations. Half-buried stones hummed faintly whenever the oceanic phenomenon occurred. Archaeologists felt as if they were touching the last breath of something waiting to awaken. They uncovered structures of an unknown architecture, curved walls made of glass-like material, seamless and cold. The same circular watermark symbols covered their surface, yet whenever anyone tried to photograph or record them, every device failed. Images blurred, sounds vanished, as if the site itself refused to be documented by modern history. Across the globe, each keeper began emitting a different tone, like musical notes of an enormous unseen instrument. The sounds were low, gentle, but with a rhythm that felt like a message. Scientists noticed the vibration followed Earth's rotation, as if syncing with something beyond the planet. Meanwhile, marine life began to behave strangely. Schools of fish moved in perfect spirals. Whales formed luminous circles at the surface. Even seabirds followed identical aerial patterns. The entire biosphere seemed to move in a shared rhythm that humans had never perceived before. In many places, children began having the same dream despite living in different countries. They dreamt of walking beneath a glowing sea, passing through a great stone gate that opened slowly. Beyond it lay a vast city with towers curved like whale bones and streets that shimmered in soft blue light. A voice spoke to them not in words, but in gentle pulses within their chests, comforting and ancient, as if the world itself was calling its children home. Parents dismissed it as coincidence, yet the similarities were too precise to ignore. The phenomenon frightened some, calmed others. But among those who stayed silent and observant, a small number began to understand. The stones were not remnants of the past, they were the heartbeats of something still alive. The world was speaking to itself, remembering what it once was. In that quiet, it felt as though the planet was rewriting its own history, not with ink and paper, but with light and resonance. For those who listened closely enough, it was clear that this was not the beginning of a disaster, but a homecoming from a time nearly forgotten. The day the message was first translated marked a turning point for the world. Not because of new technology or divine revelation, but because the voice of the earth could finally be understood, even if only a fragment. A team of scientists from several nations gathered beneath an undersea laboratory in the Mariana Islands, where the vibrations from the keeper stones were strongest. They used resonance instruments capable of detecting waves subtler than a human heartbeat. When night fell and the world above slept, they listened in silence. For the first time, Earth's voice emerged not in human language, but in broken rhythmic tones that resembled binary breath, rising and falling like the sigh of something impossibly ancient. The scientists noted that the vibrations were not random, but repeated every 12 hours. Following the tides and the planet's rotation, when mapped visually, the frequencies formed a shape that stunned them. The pattern resembled a map of Earth, but not the one known today. The continents were different, the shorelines misplaced, and in the center of the vast ocean was a single immense landmass now lost beneath the waves. They called it the Lemurian frequency, a resonance believed to be the lingering echo of a long-drowned continent. When they converted the frequency into audible sound, it produced a slow, low melody, like a lullaby sung by the planet itself. The tone was calming, yet suffused with melancholy, as though the world was mourning something it once knew. Those who listened reported dreams identical to the children's visions of underwater cities. Blue light and quiet figures who spoke without words, gazing with eyes full of memory. Many awoke with tears on their cheeks, unable to explain why. The oldest scientist on the team, a man with silver hair and a gravelly voice, whispered that the message was not coming from beyond, but from within. He believed the stones were part of Earth's own organic system, perhaps remnants of a natural technology from a time when humans and the planet lived in harmony. It was not communication, he said, but recollection. The Earth was replaying its own memory, like someone awakening from a long sleep and struggling to remember who they are. Some dismissed his theory as mystical nonsense, but the deeper they probed, the more evidence supported it. The same vibration appeared not only in the oceans, but deep within the crust, in polar ice, even inside active volcanoes. All pulsed with the same rhythm, forming a living network beyond geology. The vibrations did not carry destructive energy. Instead, they seemed to stabilize the planet, calming storms, softening quakes, steadying currents. It was as if the Earth was healing itself through memory. In a report never released to the public, the team wrote one final sentence before their project was abruptly terminated. It read, "The Earth is speaking, not to be heard, but to be remembered." That night, the laboratory in the Mariana Islands was quietly sealed. Yet the frequency continued, faint but steady, as though the planet had merely gone back to sleep, waiting patiently for another age to wake. Months after the laboratory in the Mariana Islands was shut down, strange things began happening around the world. Not as disasters or grand signs, but in subtle, almost invisible ways. Children from different continents started drawing the same symbols, concentric circles resembling ocean whirlpools, with lines of light at their centers. Elsewhere, scientists detected an increase in human brainwave frequencies during the state between wakefulness and sleep. The pattern matched the Lemurian frequency exactly. No one knew whether it was coincidence or a lingering echo of the experiment. But something had changed, as though a new heartbeat had begun beneath the rhythm of modern life. Across the cities of the world, people started dreaming of lives they never lived but could somehow remember. A woman in Oslo dreamed she walked among crystalline towers reflecting the sea's sunlight, while an old fisherman in Madagascar swore he once stood beside a white stone tower with a banner fluttering in the salted wind. They had never met, yet their stories matched. The same place, the same sea, the same unmoving sky. Some scientists dismissed it as a psychological reaction to news about Lemuria. But a smaller group suggested something deeper. They called it the memory of water, the idea that water within all living beings carries echoes of the planet's ancient past. In studies later censored from publication, researchers discovered that the Lemurian frequency resonated with water molecules. When the tone was played in a lab, the forming ice crystals displayed perfect symmetry, shaped like flowers or sea stars. This was not seen as mere physics, but as response communication of some kind. If water could remember, then perhaps the human body, composed mostly of it, could remember two reflections of things never lived but always present. It raised a new question. Were humans merely vessels for Earth's memory? Our consciousness, the reflection of something far older than history itself? As time passed, the world subtly shifted. Ocean currents grew calmer. Global warming slowed, and ecosystems once dead began to revive for no apparent reason. Along certain coasts, faint blue lights shimmered beneath the waves, dancing with the tides at night. No instrument could capture them clearly. They could only be seen by those who still believed, even slightly, in forgotten wonders. Elders called it the last breath of Lemuria, the sign that the ancient world still lived not in form, but in rhythm, in the pulse of a planet that had never truly forgotten itself. Later, divers near the Tonga Trench discovered something that shouldn't have been there. A vast stone structure rising from the seabed, carved with almost impossible precision. The rock pulsed gently to the touch like a heartbeat, its surface engraved with the same patterns seen in the scientists' resonance data. There were no letters, no words, only rhythm. After surfacing, the divers reported strange dreams that lingered for days, dreams of a silent world, with radiant seas and a young sky where all creatures walked unafraid of time. No one could tell whether the structure was man-made, natural, or something beyond both. The site was sealed by authorities under the guise of environmental protection. Yet fishermen nearby noticed their catches moving in spiral patterns, following unseen currents rising from the stone's direction. On some nights, a faint hum could be heard, soft, almost soothing, like a lullaby from a time that could no longer be described. The world seemed calm, yet beneath its surface, something was stirring, not in matter, but in awareness, in memory shared between humankind and the earth itself. Slowly, the line between dream and waking began to dissolve. People could no longer tell whether they were asleep or awake, because reality now felt like a continuation of the same dream. In certain regions, a low hum rose from the earth itself, audible only at midnight when everything was still. Scientists called it the Earth's frequency, a vibration slower than breath, softer than any known sound, yet constant like the heartbeat of the planet. No one could trace its source, but those who heard it felt inexplicably calm, as if the Earth were whispering to her children who had forgotten how to listen. Across the South Pacific, strange phenomena appeared. Marine plants began to glow in rhythmic pulses with the tides. When the waters receded, the light dimmed. When the tides rose again, the glow strengthened, as though the ocean was breathing with the world. In one surviving underwater lab, a scientist named Dr. Kalin discovered that the pattern of the light wasn't mere biochemistry. Its sequence matched the Lemurian frequency, encoded in intervals of time. The sea was speaking in rhythm neither through words nor symbols, but through harmony of water, light, and time itself. In cities far apart, humans began to synchronize. Strangers across continents dreamed the same dream at the same time. A vast blue expanse, where titanic stone shadows turned slowly, like a great wheel of time, just beginning to move. In those dreams, there was no fear, only silence and immense calm, as though sorrow itself had dissolved into an ancient tide. Many who awoke from it found tears on their faces, feeling as though they had just returned from somewhere far away, yet profoundly familiar. As the phenomenon spread, global leaders grew uneasy. Some called it a consciousness crisis, while others saw it as the next step in human evolution. A secret summit was held in Geneva to discuss the sociological implications. During the meeting, the entire building lost power for 7 seconds. In that brief darkness, everyone heard the same impossible sound, a chorus-like tone from the depths, one note that resonated in every chest. When the lights returned, silence filled the hall. No one spoke a word. Days later, human aggression worldwide plummeted. War, crime, and unrest all fell to unprecedented lows, replaced by bursts of art, music, and shared dreaming. Humanity seemed to be tuning itself to a single forgotten frequency. Not everyone embraced it. Some denounced it as manipulation, a subconscious experiment, or a dangerous mystic awakening. Yet the louder their protests became, the softer their voices sounded, as though the world itself preferred silence to hear its own heartbeat. In that silence, Earth appeared at peace. Deep within its core, something ancient stirred once more. The faint hum grew clear, not as a warning, not a call, but a whisper that nothing was truly ending. That civilization was never the summit, but merely another turning page. Beneath the deep blue oceans, the old world smiled again. For humanity had finally begun to listen to what the planet had been saying since the beginning of time. In the end, everything returned to calm. The sea that once raged now whispered gently among the reefs, like a mother lulling her children to sleep after a long night. In the sky, the northern lights danced more slowly, as though the earth itself had chosen to slow its rhythm so humankind could breathe in harmony once more. There were no more engines roaring, no more cities drowning out the voice of the wind. The world became like an old book being closed softly, not because the story had ended, but because the reader had finally understood its meaning without needing more words. In distant villages, people spoke in gentler tones, listening to one another without rushing to reply. They planted trees not for harvest, but for the shade that would one day belong to those yet unborn. Along the coasts where the ancient city had once sunk, waves carried in strange fragments of stone. Their surfaces were smooth as glass, but faint lines within resembled writing, like messages sent from a time that no longer existed. Some called them Lemurian relics. Others said they were tricks of nature. Whoever touched them felt a pulse, a quiet vibration, as though the stone still remembered a voice that once sang to it ages ago. No one could prove it, but each time such stones appeared, seabirds would circle above them briefly. then glide silently toward the horizon. Amid all this, the night sky grew clearer. The stars seemed closer, sharper, as though the world had washed its eyes clean after centuries of human noise. Among the familiar constellations appeared a new light, not bright, but pulsing softly, like a heart still beating within eternity. People called it the last breath of Lemuria. No telescope could measure it, yet every time it appeared, human dreams grew longer, deeper, and more serene. Children slept with faint smiles. The old stopped asking about the future, and the sea kept whispering to the stones, guarding secrets that only time could understand. There is no true ending to this story, because the world never truly ends. It merely changes shape, waiting to be rediscovered by those who listen more than they see. Deep beneath the ocean, among ruins wrapped in coral and pearl, there echoes a song that never ceased, the same voice that once called the first humans to dream. Then let them wander, so they might return with gentler hearts. And when the final night arrives, the earth will keep turning quietly while humanity sleeps in long peace. No one knows if they will wake again, or if this is merely a pause before the next world begins. Yet one truth endures, within every breath, within every wave's rhythm. Lingers a trace of that ancient melody the song once sung in Lemuria, under a sky without a name, before Atlantis, before all things. A song that now murmurs softly into the ear of night, closing the story with melancholy grace, letting the mystery remain alive within eternal silence.